Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Luffy fanfics, back with the amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What if Luffy ate Chromatic Dragon Devil Fruit same as Kaido. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Luffy sat down at Makino's, the only bar in Fuchsia Village, as he enjoyed the sights and sounds of the red-haired pirates partying after they had returned from another successful voyage. All around him, pirates drank, ate, brawled, and played games as they celebrated their success and spent their money as if it was going out of style. The only thing that kept Luffy from enjoying himself was the horrible pain that afflicted his face after he had tried to prove his strength earlier in the day by cutting his cheek open with a knife to prove he wasn't afraid of pain. This didn't hurt one bit, he declared proudly to Shanks, the captain of the red-haired pirates sitting next to him and the man that Luffy had been trying to prove his strength. Liar, Shanks declared as he pointed at the now bandaged cheek. Don't ever do something so stupid again. Shanks' reprimand didn't faze Luffy. I'm not afraid of pain at all. Take me out on your next voyage, and I'll prove myself, Luffy proclaimed proudly. Instead of being impressed by his declaration, Shanks began to laugh. You don't have what it takes to be a pirate, Luffy, the red-haired pirate declared smugly. You're like an anchor in the water, and being unable to swim is a pirate's greatest weakness. Why do you think we got you that shirt? Luffy looked down at his shirt, which was emblazoned with an anchor. Shanks had gotten it for him a few months ago. Luffy frowned as he now realized the insult, but he refused to let it faze him. Then I'll just stay on land. I've been training hard. My punches are as strong as a pistol, he proclaimed while punching the air. Pistol fire, Shanks said in a dismissive tone while sipping on his glass of sake, only half paying attention to what Luffy was saying. If Luffy was angry before, he was furious now. What kind of tone is that? Come, one captain, one voyage wouldn't hurt, Lucky Roo chimed in as several crewmates voiced their agreement that taking Luffy out once would be harmless. Fine, I'll take him out if one of you stays behind, Shanks replied happily. We've said enough, let's drink. They immediately ran off to the other end of the bar to resume their party. What kind of friends are you guys? Luffy asked angrily while glaring daggers at the crew who had betrayed him. Look, Luffy, you're still too young. Wait at least another 10 years, then I'll reconsider taking you out to sea, Shanks said calmly. Luffy was anything but calm. Darn it, Shanks, I'm not a kid anymore. Look, calm down. Here, have some juice. Shanks slid a mug of juice over from his side of the bar into Luffy's waiting hands. Luffy, never one to deny anything free, thanked Shanks and began to drink happily. You really aren't just a kid. Look at him drinking his juice. Shanks laughed. His joke made the entire crew join in his laughter. If that juice is too strong for you, I can get you a nice tall glass of warm milk. Luffy felt embarrassed by the man's joke, so he decided to walk to the opposite side of the bar and sit next to Ben Beckman. Luffy, you should try and understand the captain's feelings, Ben Beckman said casually while taking a drag from his cigarette. Shanks, feelings? Luffy asked, genuinely confused. Yes, he is our leader. He knows being a pirate is interesting, but he also knows how dangerous it is for someone as young as you to be out at sea. Ben paused to take another drag from his cancer stick. If you were hurt on a voyage, he would never be able to forgive himself. Luffy hung his head a little after that explanation. He knew being a pirate was a dangerous thing, but he couldn't help but want to join Shanks. Just then, another presence entered the room. It was the owner of the bar, a pretty young woman by the name of Makino. Her dark hair and simple green dress stood out amongst all the pirates in the bar. She carried a large barrel of sake over to many pirates who were running low on the drink. You seem to be having a fun time, Captain, she chimed in happily while setting the barrel down. Yep, making fun of him is my joy in life, was Shanks' lighthearted response. Before Luffy could defend himself, Makino chimed in to stop the incoming fight. Luffy, would you like something to eat? Luffy nodded happily and prepared for his meal. Luffy realized he didn't have any money on his person, so he decided to make a promise. I don't have any money now, Makino, but I promise I'll pay you with my treasure. What treasure? Are you lying again, Luffy? Shanks questioned. No, I'm not lying. I'm going to be a pirate and pay her back with the treasure I find. Once he got lucky and found buried treasure, he would pay Makino back with interest. Makino smiled at that response. I'll just add it to your tab, Luffy, she said happily before walking to the kitchen to prepare the food. Several minutes later, Luffy was biting into a steak and talking with Shanks. So, how long are you going to stay? The boy asked while trying to tear into the tough piece of meat. Well, set off a couple more times. Then we'll head north. Luffy tried to hide his sadness at the news that they would be leaving soon. Well, I'll be sure to learn how to swim by then, Luffy stated proudly. Just then, the bar doors swung open and slammed against the wall, drawing the attention of everyone in the bar. A group of dirty-looking men walked into the bar. Their clothes were worn and filthy, but they were all well armed and gave off a menacing presence. So these are pirates, The group leader set out as he looked around the room at the red-haired pirates who had taken a break from their partying to view the bar's latest occupants. "First time I've seen pirates. They look pretty dumb to me," he said, not caring they could hear everything. He walked up to the bar, stood right next to where Shanks was sitting, and addressed Makino. "We're mountain bandits. We aren't here to cause trouble. We just want to buy 10 barrels of sake." Makino ran a hand through her hair nervously before responding. "I'm sorry, but we've run out of sake." "Oh, then what are all these pirates drinking? Is it water?" he asked while gesturing to all the pirates in the room who were drinking. "They are drinking sake, but that's all we have," Makino replied. The conversation began to bore Luffy. Looking over at his plate, he realized he ate all his food, but he was still hungry. He saw a small chest on the bar next to him. His curiosity overcame him, and he opened it up to see what was inside. It was a fruit, and it was unlike any he had ever seen before. Its skin was black and had numerous ridges on it that looked like scales. While most of the scales were black, there was an occasional red, yellow, and purple one. Never one to turn down a chance to try something new. Luffy took a big bite out of the fruit. He almost had to stop himself from gagging. It was bitter and seemed to taste spoiled. Luffy never believed in wasting food, no matter how terrible, so he ate the rest in one bite and washed it down with some juice. He was distracted from the horrible taste when he saw the bandit smash a bottle of sake that Shanks was kind enough to offer him. What shocked Luffy most was how Shanks didn't fight back. He just calmly cleaned up after the bandits. The leader took out a wanted poster. "My name is Higuma. I've killed 56 people, and I have an 8 million bully bounty on my head," he stated proudly, hoping to intimidate Shanks and everyone in the bar. Rather than be intimidated, Shanks simply ignored Higuma in favor of cleaning up the shattered bottle. "Makino, I'm so sorry about the floor. Do you have a mop?" Shanks asked as he began cleaning the mess. Hearing this, Higuma took out his sword and swiped it over the bar, destroying numerous bottles. "There, since you like cleaning, you can clean all you want now," Higuma stated while laughing along with his fellow bandits. "See you later, you bunch of chickens," he said right as he left through the bar's front doors. After a few seconds of silence, the bar erupted in laughter. "Ha, he really got you, Captain," Lucky Roo stated cheerfully, causing more laughter amongst the crew. Even Shanks began laughing. Luffy was standing there, not believing what he was witnessing. "What the hell was that?" he yelled furiously. "You should have fought him. What kind of man lets himself get pushed around like that?" Shanks got up off the ground before addressing Luffy. "It was just a little sake. It's not worth getting worked up about." After Shanks said that, Luffy simply turned around and began walking out of the bar. "Hey, now don't leave," Shanks said while grabbing Luffy's arm, stopping the boy. "I don't even want to look at you, Shanks. Let me go. I'm going to find a better role model," he yelled angrily, trying to shake the older man's grip. He could feel his anger building up as Shanks refused to let go of his arm. His stomach felt like it was on fire, and as he struggled, that fire seemed to travel from his stomach to his throat as he got angrier. "I said let me go," Luffy screamed as he did, so his vision was blurred by a bright light and a sudden heat filling the room. Before he could figure out what had just happened, the sounds of screams filled the bar. "Fire! Quick, douse the flames. Don't use alcohol, you idiot. The captain's on fire. Stop, drop, and roll. My leg." Luffy saw Shanks trying to pout out a fire that had engulfed his shirt as numerous members of his crew were trying to put out a fire that had erupted on Makino's bar. "What's happening?" Luffy cried out, but as he did, his vision was blurred by flames that erupted from his mouth. He was about to scream again, but he felt a pair of hands clamp over his mouth, and he looked up and saw they belonged to the red-haired pirate's first mate Ben Beckman. "Stop yelling, Luffy," the man ordered. "You'll only make it worse." A few hectic minutes later, the pirates put the fires out, and Luffy found himself face to face with a very frightened Shanks. "Luffy, what the hell was that?" Shanks demanded as he gestured to his burned shirt and burned bar. Before Luffy could answer, the voice of Lucky Roo called out, "The devil fruit we took from the enemy is gone." The portly cook held up an empty wooden chest. "Luffy, did you eat the fruit that was in this chest?" "Yeah, wasn't that desert?" Luffy asked as he remembered the strange fruit. "It was right next to my plate. I ate it, but it tasted terrible." Before Luffy could say anything more, he was lifted upside down by Shanks, who had grabbed him by his ankles, and he was shaken violently by the captain. "Spit it out," Shanks demanded. "Luffy, you need to spit that fruit out right now." "Stop it, Captain. The fruit takes effect after the first bite," Ben ordered, which made Shanks stop shaking Luffy. Once Luffy regained his bearings, Shanks began to yell at him. "Luffy, that was a devil fruit and one of the treasures of the sea. Whoever eats one will get a great power, but will never be able to swim in the ocean again." Luffy's jaw was literally hanging to the floor. He was stunned into silence. It seemed as if his dream of being a pirate just ended. 1 week later, Luffy was seated once again in Makino's bar. However, this time the bar was practically empty except for him, Makino, and a couple of farmers in the corner having their lunch. He sat there depressed while drinking some juice Makino was nice enough to give him. I really misjudged those guys. I thought they were brave and tough, Luffy muttered sadly. Are you sure about that, Luffy? Maybe sometimes it takes more courage not to fight, Makino said happily while she polished a glass. Luffy, however, did not look convinced. You're a girl, Makino, you wouldn't understand. Men stand up for themselves no matter what happens, Luffy said in between sips from his juice. Is that right? I guess I don't understand. I would have fought. Luffy wasn't sure if he could win against guys like that, but ever since eating the devil fruit, he had been trying to unlock its power. Shanks and his crew had tried numerous times to get Luffy to do something, but he hadn't been able to replicate breathing fire. As he thought about ways to figure out what his powers were, the bar door swung open. Make way for the terror of the highlands. The mountain bandit from 3 days earlier walked in with his fellow bandits trailing behind him. They all took their seats around the bar. No pirates in here today. It certainly smells better. He sat down and leaned back into his chair. Well, what are you waiting for? We aren't so cruel that we won't pay, so serve us some sake. Luffy watched as the bandits drank the bar dry, laughing and joking with each other as they did so. Those pirates were weaklings. Yeah, they act all cool, but they are just a bunch of sea rats that scurry away at the first sign of trouble. With each insult, Luffy felt himself getting progressively angrier. He had always had a bit of a temper, but this was different. It felt like his stomach was on fire, and the fire was beginning to spread to the rest of his body. With each insult he heard directed at the red-haired pirates, he felt his body tighten as if there was something in him that was begging to come out. Yeah, that captain was especially pathetic. Higuma toned in. Guys like him make me angry. A pathetic waste of space that should be out of his misery. Shut up, Luffy roared as he glared at the bandit. Shanks isn't pathetic. You say something, you little punk, Higuma asked as he turned to glare at Luffy. You standing up for that chicken shit of a captain. Luffy felt his anger boil to the surface, and it made him feel strong, stronger than he had ever felt before. As he gazed at Higuma, he felt the urge to crush him, tear him apart. If you don't stop making fun of Shanks, what's wrong? Higuma asked sarcastically. Is the baby angry that I insulted that pathetic pirate? What's a little brat like you going to do to me? Finger paint me to death. I'm going to rip and tear you apart. Higuma laughed as he drew his sword. I'd like to see you try, brat. I think I'll cut off one of your limbs to teach you a lesson. The bandit stepped towards Luffy with his sword. Luffy looked up, and all he saw was red. Shanks strode towards Fuchsia village at a pace between walking and running. His crew members were behind him and trying to keep up as they hauled chestfuls of loot they had won on their last expedition and intended to use to buy all the booze in town. Slow down, Captain. Ben Beckman called out. Some of us are carrying loot. Then carry it faster, Shanks ordered in a harsher tone than he intended. But he couldn't help himself. It was only a week ago that Luffy ate a devil fruit, and ever since then, Shanks had been concerned. He had no idea what devil fruit it was that Luffy had eaten, and the boy seemed unable to replicate the fire-breathing abilities that he had demonstrated at the bar. At first, he thought it was some Paramecia fire devil fruit. Still, after going out on this voyage and obtaining an encyclopedia on devil fruits that detailed many fruits' histories, strengths, and weaknesses, he immediately ordered his crew back to Fuchsia. He hadn't found the exact fruit. Not all the devil fruits had pictures, some lacked descriptions, and some only had names. But he had narrowed the possibilities of what type of fruit Luffy had eaten down to a handful, and none of them were good. He looked up and saw Makino running towards him and his men. The village was behind her, and he briefly glimpsed smoke rising from it. Makino, what's wrong? Shanks asked as the girl fell to her knees in front of him. It's Luffy. The bandits came back and began to make fun of you, and Luffy got angry? He didn't stay to hear her finish. He ran with all the speed he could conjure and sprint towards the village. His surroundings became a blur as he pushed his body to its limit. As he got closer, he saw a decent amount of smoke rising from the village and saw that one of the town's many windmills was on fire. And as he entered the town proper, he saw the streets were littered with the bodies of dead mountain bandits. Many of them appeared to have been burned, but a few were torn in half as if a savage beast had cleaved their bodies with its claws. He heard the sounds of his crewmates come up behind him as they finally managed to catch up with him. What the hell happened here, Captain? Ben asked as the sharpshooter gazed at the damage. Luffy has activated his devil fruit powers, Shanks answered as he looked around for any sign of Luffy. But all he saw were the dead bodies of bandits. A few villagers were hiding in their homes or trying to put out the fires with water buckets. What kind of devil fruit could do this? Lucky Roo asked as the cook looked at the destruction. A fire, Loja. The bodies looked like they had been torn apart by a creature with claws. I would guess a zoan fruit, a carnivorous one that allows the user to breathe fire. Shanks now had a pretty good idea of which fruit it was that Luffy ate. It could only have been one of a few mythical Zoan fruits. He had seen many Zoan fruit users during his travels with the Roger pirates. Zoan fruits were among the best for up-close combat due to their power increasing with the user's natural strength and the animal's strength usually being beneficial. But there were side effects with the user taking on traits of the animal. That became an issue with carnivorous Zoans. Individuals who transformed into carnivorous animals tended to be more violent, with their new animal instincts predisposing the user to hunt and commit acts of savagery. Most users could suppress their new animalistic instincts and get on with life usually. However, many who gave in to their new animalistic nature became more beast than man. Individuals such as the beast pirates, whose leaders were almost entirely composed of Zoan fruit users, were known to be ruthless individuals who acted with a savagery that rivaled the most feral animals. Shanks knew Luffy wasn't a savage, he was a good boy, but he was still a boy who had no experience controlling his new power and didn't have the mental fortitude to fight off such powerful urges, especially from the fruit as powerful as the one he had eaten. He heard screams coming from the other end of the village, near the small docks where smaller fishing boats would come and go from opposite of where his crew docked their much larger ship. "Quickly, boys, we have to save Luffy. Whatever you do, don't hurt him. We have to save him from himself." Higuma sprinted at speeds he never thought possible as he made his way towards the docks of the village he was fleeing from. Behind him, he heard the footsteps of his men who were sprinting after him in mad desperation to escape the monster that now hunted them. He still wasn't sure what had happened. 1 second, that punk kid was yelling at him, and he was walking over to teach that brat a lesson. The next thing he knew, the boy's skin turned pitch black, and the kid had let out a roar that scared him so severely that his followers and himself ran out of the bar. That decision probably saved his life since the bar doors behind them had been thrown off their hinges, and they were being hunted by a black-scaled creature with a body roughly the size of a horse, not counting its long neck and long tail. Higuma heard his men calling out for him as they ran behind him, but he ignored them. It was every man for himself. He heard several of them cry out in pain as they met their ends. He felt a burst of heat from behind him, followed by a scream as one of his followers was set ablaze. He picked up his pace and eventually reached the fishing dock where a single small rowboat was docked. He jumped into the nearest one and, with his sword, cut the ropes that tethered it to the docks and immediately pushed off. Grabbing a set of oars, he began to paddle with all the strength he had in his arms, and soon he was moving away from the docks and the black monster that had been following him. Higuma looked up at the docks that were getting farther away and saw a half-dozen of his men reach them. They began to cry out to him, begging him to return and not to abandon them. "Come back, Higuma. Don't leave us here to die. Get back here, you bastard." Higuma ignored them and kept paddling. And as he got farther away, he saw the monster that had chased them descend upon his remaining men. The creature's body was large and somewhat serpentine, covered in black scales that shone like darkened steel. It had a long serpent-like neck with a reptilian head covered in spikes and 2 great horns like that of a devil. It had 4 legs, and behind it was a massive tail tipped with what appeared to be a giant sharp spike. It was a dragon, like out of the storybooks Higuma remembered reading when he was a child. He remembered reading about 2 different kinds of dragons, the long serpent-like ones that brought rain and good fortune. Then there were massive black ones that hoarded treasure, devoured knights, and kidnapped princesses. This dragon in front of him was the latter type, although much smaller but no less dangerous. He could only watch as the creature swung its tail and crushed several of his men who went flying through the air. The rest of his men jumped into the water and tried to swim away, but the creature responded by opening its maw and unleashed a gout of flame that hit the water where his men were swimming. Those who were above the water's surface were burned, while those beneath the water's surface didn't fare better as the flames caused the water to boil, and the men were quickly boiled alive. Higuma quickened his pace and rowed as fast as his arms could go until they burned with pain from the exertion. The dragon onshore glared at him and let out a roar followed by a massive breath of fire that shot out across the surface of the bay and towards Higuma's small craft. The water boiled, and the flames came close as the very air around him steamed up with a mist as the water evaporated. But the flames stopped short of actually being able to reach him. Higuma could only laugh at the utter ridiculousness of his situation and of his escape from death as the dragon seemed unwilling to jump into the water. "In your face," Higuma cried out hysterically as tears of sorrow and joy fell freely from his eyes. "You can't reach me, you fire-breathing sack of crap." Suddenly the dragon let out an enraged roar and from its back unfurled a set of massive black wings. "Oh, shit, I forgot dragons could fly," was all Higuma had time to say as the creature took flight and soared up into the air before quickly descending upon him as its maw filled with razor-sharp teeth crashed into him and the boat he was sitting in. "Luffy," Shanks called out as he watched the black dragon Luffy had changed into taking flight and crash into the boat he had been pursuing. Whatever massive power the boy had gained from the devil fruit he had eaten, he was still a hammer in the water, so Shanks shed his cloak and jumped in after the boy. The ocean wasn't cold but felt unusually warm as he dove into the water of the bay. It took some time for him to reach where he saw the dragon fall, and with a deep breath and a deep dive, he managed to find Luffy's sinking body as it sank to the bottom of the bay. After several minutes of struggling, he managed to get the boy back to the docks where his crew was waiting with open arms and quickly took the boy from Shanks and his first mate. Ben Beckman wanted no time to lay the boy down and started compressing the boy's chest. By the time Shanks pulled himself out of the water and came up alongside them, Luffy began to hack and cough up water as Ben gave one final compression on the boy's chest. Luffy's black eyes darted around until they finally fell upon Shanks. Tears began to flow freely from them. Shanks quickly picked the boy up and wrapped his arms around the child protectively. Shanks, Luffy sputtered, his voice cracking with pain. Shanks held the boy tighter. It's okay, Luffy. Everything's going to be okay. Shanks, the boy croaked again, his voice barely above a whisper. I taste blood in my mouth. What have I done? Shanks let out a tired sigh as he took a sip of whiskey straight from a bottle. The alcohol burned his throat and set all his senses alight as if they were on fire. He was currently sitting alone in Makino's bar, helping himself to her inventory of alcohol. While he usually preferred sake, he needed a variety of strong drinks to drown his sorrows tonight. He took a break from his drinking to look at the bar's door, or rather a lack of one, since all that remained was a massive tarp that was being used to protect the inside of the bar from outside elements. Part of the building had been taken out when Luffy transformed inside of the bar and started his rampage. The door, a few buildings that had caught fire, and the entirety of Higuma's mountain bandits were the casualties of the day. That and a small boy's innocence. I'm sorry, Luffy, it's all my fault, Shanks muttered as he reached for the whiskey bottle to take another swig, only for it to be taken away by the familiar form of Ben Beckman. It's not like you to drink alone, Captain, Ben said as he pulled up a bar stool and sat next to Shanks. You could try comforting Luffy, or you can help us in repairing the town. Shanks shook his head. Luffy was currently staying at the mayor's house with Makino while Shanks and his crew fixed up Makino's bar in the town. He knew that he should try comforting Luffy, but he could barely look at the boy without feeling guilt. What comfort can I offer him when I'm the one that ruined his life? Shanks asked angrily as he reached for another bottle of alcohol and took a swig. Luffy's memory of the day had been hazy, but the boy remembered bits and pieces. The boy remembered getting angry, tearing apart the Mount's bandits, setting fire to others, and worst of all, Luffy had remembered dispatching Higuma by biting the man in half. A child doesn't easily recover from this type of trauma. Killing is hard enough for grown men to deal with, but a boy Luffy's age having to deal with this is. Luffy's strong, Ben offered. He has a will of iron. I'm sure he will bounce back from this. It will be a challenge, but he seems the type to face challenges. Shanks saw the truth in Ben's words, but there was something else irking him. It's not just that Ben. It's that devil fruit he ate. It might just ruin his life. Devil fruits can be a huge benefit to a pirate, Ben retorted. You might not have won, but many pirates do. Heck, pretty much every crew of note in the Grand Line is either captained by a devil fruit user or has one among their crew. In Luffy's case, the kid seems to have a powerhouse of a fruit. He's going to be big when he gets out there as a pirate in earnest. It's not just that, Ben, Shanks argued as he slammed down his drink and reached over to the side of the bar where a book was sitting. It was a book on devil fruits and their powers and categorized all known fruits. He slid it over to Ben, who took it and opened it up. Devil fruits have side effects, especially carnivorous Zoan ones. Zoan fruits imbue the user with certain traits from the animals they embody. For most Zoan users, this is mild, but it's different for carnivorous Zoan fruit users. They gain predatory instincts and other traits from their fruits. They gain power, but also violence and brutality come easier to them. Ben pulled the cigarette out of his mouth. Luffy is a child, Shanks broke in, cutting off his first mate. A child that eats a Zoan fruit is even more susceptible to mental changes. Read it for yourself in that book. That book was written by Dr. Vegapunk himself, the greatest mind of this world. Ben did as he was bid and began to read. Let's see. Children, in particular, are susceptible to mental changes brought on by a devil fruit, especially those of the Zoan classification. I believe this is due to the fact that children's brains are still developing neural pathways, thus making their minds more malleable to change when the fruit overrides a person's lineage factor in order to adapt the person's body to the devil's power. This also applies as the child grows up with the fruit lineage factor affecting development during puberty. Further research is required to be sure. Well, shit, that doesn't sound great. Indeed it doesn't, Shanks replied as he leaned forward onto the bar. The devil fruit he ate in particular. I'm pretty sure it's the mythical Zoan the serpent fruit model, Chromatic dragon. There's only one other devil fruit user who has eaten a similar mythical Zoan fruit, and it's Kaido, who is more beast than man. Luffy isn't like Kaido. If you think he'll turn out like him just because of a devil fruit, then you're underestimating that kid, Ben argued. As for his fruit ... what the heck is a chromatic dragon? It's a dragon from Elbaf legends, Shanks said, recalling his time in Elbaf when he was a cabin boy on Gul D. Rogers' ship. Chromatic dragons have black scales, 6 limbs including their wings, and have a variety of breath attacks. I can't recall all the details, but Elbaf legend speaks of dragons like the Nidhogger, Fafnir, Lindworm, OTR, and many more. They are portrayed in Elbaf legends as great serpents that are greedy, vengeful, and destructive. Ben shook his head. All we can do is have faith in Luffy and hope that he takes the right path in life. Not much we can do about it now. Yeah, Shanks looked down in his hands as he considered what he would do next. The right path. He got up and set aside his drinks, and walked out of Makino's bar, leaving behind the alcohol and his first mate. The night air was cool and crisp. The moon was full, which was nice because his men scurried about the village hard at work. Pirates weren't exactly the best when it came to manual labor, but he had a few shipwrights on his crew who were good at working with wood, and they were busy fixing up a windmill and several other buildings that had been damaged in the day's battle. His men scurried about carrying lumber, nails, and anything else needed to fix the damaged buildings. His crew made no complaint about their work. This village had been good to them for the last year, and this was the least they could do, especially since it had been their fault that Luffy ate the devil fruit in the first place. His men had already gathered the bandits' bodies and thrown them in a massive pile just outside the village, where they were promptly set aflame, creating a gigantic bonfire that filled the air with smoke. It was as good a funeral as a criminal could expect to get in this day and age. Eventually, he reached the mayor's house, where Mayor Whoop-Slap allowed Makino and Luffy to stay while the bar was being repaired. He entered through the front door and was greeted by the mayor, sitting at a small table with Makino, sharing a cup of tea. "How is he?" Shanks asked as he walked up to them. "He's doing well, all things considered," Makino answered as she took a sip of tea. He coughed up some parts earlier. Shanks knew what she meant by parts, considering the fact that Luffy had torn apart the bandits, in Higuma's case biting the man in half. Shanks found himself cursing his pacifism. He had heard from Makino that Luffy had started this entire altercation by standing up for him and his crew when the bandits had insulted them. "I wish I had dealt with Higuma when he came into the bar that day. None of this would have happened. If wishes were boats, everyone in this world would sail," Mayor Whoop-Slap stated plainly. "It does no good to look back with regret. Instead, look forward with hope. I tried talking to the boy, but my words had little effect. I think you should give it a try. It will mean more coming from you." Shanks nodded and walked upstairs to where Luffy was staying for the night. He found the boy standing on a chair so that he might look out of a window. "Hi, Shanks," Luffy stated without even turning around. "Hey, Luffy," Shanks replied. He looked out the window to see what the boy was looking at and winced at what he saw. The bonfire where his men had piled the bandits' bodies was going strong. Its flames leaped up into the air and lit up the entire village where his men were busy repairing the town's damages. "I did all this," Luffy stated plainly, with very little emotion in the child's voice. "I didn't mean to. I just got so angry. And before I knew it, everything was just..." "It's not your fault, Luffy. I'm the one who killed them. They chose their fate when they attacked you," Shanks replied. "Makino told me what happened. You were only trying to stand up for us when their leader drew his blade. Those who live and strive for violence will meet a violent end." They might not be the right words, but they were all Shank could offer the boy. "I guess so," Luffy muttered sadly. "I just ... what if it happens again? What if I can't control my power and hurt someone close to me?" "You won't," Shank stated confidently. "How do you know?" Luffy asked as he hopped down from the chair and sat cross-legged on the ground. "How can you be so sure I won't change and hurt one of the villagers, or maybe even Makino?" "Because you're strong," Shanks said as he put a comforting hand on Luffy and sat on the floor across from the boy. "You're probably the strongest kid I've met on my travels." Luffy pouted. "You're always saying I'm a weak anchor." "That's just me teasing you," Shanks replied. "I need to get my teasing in now while I can. In a few years, you'll be strong enough to kick my butt, so I need to enjoy teasing you while you're small and scrawny." "Does that mean you'll take me on a voyage?" Luffy asked, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Seeing Luffy's mood go through such a change filled Shanks' heart with joy, to the point where he considered it, but he knew better. "You're still too young, Luffy. Heck, I wasn't allowed to go on a voyage until I was 9 years old, and even then, I was a ship's apprentice who cleaned the deck, did the laundry, peeled potatoes, and unclogged the toilets. But that's only 2 years older than I am right now," Luffy argued. "And I wouldn't mind doing all those crappy jobs either." "Can't you just do one voyage?" "Nope." Shanks felt terrible, but he wasn't budging on this issue. "Trust me, Luffy. The ocean is a dangerous place. I learned that the hard way. I have no doubt you'll be a great pirate one day, but for now, you should focus on training yourself. If you master that devil fruit power of yours, then there won't be anyone in this world who can stop you." "Really?" Luffy asked, excitement evident in his voice. "So what is my power exactly?" "I know I can change into a giant creature, but I didn't see myself in the mirror or anything." Shanks couldn't help but smile at the boy's childish excitement. "You are a mythical Zoan devil fruit. one that allows you to turn into a chromatic dragon, a winged serpent from Elbaf legends. There's only one other pirate in this world that I know of who has a fruit similar to yours, and he's widely regarded as the strongest creature alive. Really? Luffy was obviously thrilled. Yes, but promise me you'll train and never rely on your devil fruit too much, Shanks stated thoughtfully. In your case, training should never be ignored. Your dragon form will grow in strength proportional to your human form. In other words, the stronger you are as a human, the stronger you will be as a dragon. You should also try learning a martial art. It becomes beneficial when you use your hybrid form. Hybrid form, a cross between your dragon and your human form. Shanks judged that he was confusing the poor boy. It couldn't be helped since he was hardly the authority on devil fruits. Don't worry about that for now. Just tell your grandpa to teach you the 6 powers. It's the form of martial arts that many strong marines use. Even some pirates have been known to have their own form of it. Okay, Luffy answered simply as he leaned back. So ... what type of ship were you an apprentice on? Was it a pirate ship? Yup, Shanks nodded, glad the boy's mood was back to normal. I was just an orphan in West Blue living on the streets. It was just me and another kid my age named Bucky. Shanks spent the rest of the night telling Luffy stories about his past voyages, happy to offer the child a distraction from the horrors of the day's events. Luffy watched as the red-haired pirates finished packing up their belongings. It had been a little over a month since he had unlocked the powers of his devil fruit, and he was still coming to terms with it. But he promised himself he would be strong so that he never found himself in such a position again. As he stood on the docks, Shanks came up alongside him. You're leaving for good? Luffy asked, already knowing the answer. Yup, Shanks replied. We've been in this peaceful sea for too long. We need to get back to the Grand Line. If we stay here much longer, the Marines will get word of us. Are you going to beg us to take you? Nope, Luffy replied simply. I want to go, but I've decided to become a pirate by myself when I've become comfortable with my new power. Until he could reliably control himself when in his dragon form, he would hold off on becoming a pirate. Even if you master the ability to become a dragon at will, I'm still going to be a league above you, Shanks replied. My crew and I are going to grow strong as well. But don't worry, leave some treasure for you and whatever crew you assemble. I will become a pirate, Luffy declared stubbornly. I'm going to have a crew that's bigger and stronger than yours, and I'm going to find the biggest treasure and become Pirate King. Shanks smiled. So you're going to be bigger than us, eh? He asked in a light tone. And you're going to find One Piece. I never had much interest in that treasure, but if you want it, then I have something for you. Luffy watched as Shanks reached into his pocket and produced a compass. He flipped it open and held it in front of Luffy, who took it and looked at the strange navigational instrument. Luffy wasn't an expert on navigation or compasses, but even he knew this thing was broken. This thing is broken, Luffy complained as he pointed at the needle. It doesn't point north. Even I know that north is that way towards the Goa Kingdom. He pointed towards the Goa Kingdom for emphasis. Shanks laughed. That's because this compass doesn't point north. It points to whatever you want it to. Luffy could only raise an eyebrow at that statement. So ... you're saying that this is a magic compass? Shanks chuckled and shook his head. Nope, this compass is just like you. He held it up for emphasis. This compass ate the seek fruit, which allows it to seek out whatever the person holding it wants so long as the person has a general idea of what it is they are looking for. Devil fruits are tricky things. And this compass is finicky, but it has saved my life on numerous occasions. Luffy was more confused than ever. How does a compass eat a fruit? Damned if I know. Shanks shrugged. But this one did. It's one of 3 items my old captain gave to me. This compass, my hat, and my sword. I would give you my sword, but I get the feeling you're more liable to hurt yourself with it than an enemy. And my hat probably wouldn't survive your transformations. But that's fine since this item will help you more. This compass is one of my greatest treasures. He pushed it into Luffy's hands. It's yours now. Don't you need this? Luffy asked if the compass really could do what Shanks was claiming, then he felt bad for taking it. Nah, I mostly just use it to tell me where the nearest bar is or the nearest bottle of rum. Shanks shrugged. Take care of it for me, all right. When you become a great pirate, you'll return this to me. Luffy held back his tears as he watched Shanks board his ship. And Luffy spent the next half hour waving goodbye to the red-haired pirates until their ship disappeared over the horizon. Luffy looked at the compass in his hand. The needle on the compass was pointing in the direction where Shanks and his crew had sailed off. So you know I want to follow them, huh? Well, let's try something else. He thought of what he could ask the compass to see if it really worked. Point me to where Gold Roger's treasure One Piece is. The compass's needle began to spin around in circles endlessly, never pointing in a single direction. I guess that would make things easy, wouldn't it? Shanks did say that the compass had limitations since he didn't know what the One Piece was or looked like. Maybe the compass didn't have enough information to find the One Piece, or perhaps it was being stubborn and was refusing to tell him. Remembering how Shanks used it to find booze, maybe it could help him in the same way. Okay then, point me towards the nearest piece of meat. The compass responded by pointing towards the east in the direction of Fuchsia Village. Luffy couldn't help but smile. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Author's note. I know I have many other stories I should be writing for, but I couldn't help it. After catching up on One Piece and reading through the Wano arc, I wanted to write something like this. Kaido's devil fruit is Opus, all the powers of an Eastern dragon. Now Luffy has all the powers of a Western dragon. I'm using most dragon folklore from Western culture and chromatic dragon lore from D&D as inspiration for this. And yes, the compass functions like Jack Sparrow's compass from Pirates of the Caribbean with a few more powers. It eaten a devil fruit similar to the other items in the One Piece world that have eaten devil fruits, only this compass ate a paramecia. Please leave a review to let me know what you think. Should I keep writing? Does Luffy as a dragon interest you? Please let me know. Also, I dislike using Japanese words in my writing because it makes my grammar software drown me in error codes. So I won't be using Japanese terms to describe devil fruits or attacks. I know the Japanese sounds cooler, but it makes my grammar software drown me in error codes and gives me a headache during editing. If you wish to support me, check out my profile to get a link to a certain patronage site. I post both my original and unoriginal work there, and patrons of any tier get chapters a week early. I hate this place, Luffy muttered angrily as he trudged over a rickety wooden bridge that crossed over a deep ravine. It had been a little over 3 months since his grandfather Garp had dumped him on the outskirts of the Goa Kingdom to live with mountain bandits of all people. He hated it, but the only thing he hated more than mountain bandits was being alone. That was why he found himself trudging after the only other person around his age in these mountains, an older boy by the name of Ace. So far, Ace had scoffed at any attempt at friendship, even attacking Luffy when he tried following after him. But Luffy was determined and stubborn, something that had only increased since he ate his devil fruit, which was why he now found himself trudging after Ace through the woods outside of Daden's bandit camp. He took another step over the bridge where he knew Ace had walked and stopped when he heard it creaking. The rickety bridge suddenly gave way, and Luffy quickly sprouted a large set of black wings from his back. With all his might, Luffy began to flap his new wings as hard as he could, which allowed him to hover, and with great effort, he began to clumsily fly towards the other end, lest he fall into the deep ravine. Luffy flew with all the grace of an eagle that was piloting a blimp. He hadn't yet mastered his new powers, and his black wings flapped rapidly and out of sync as he struggled to fly towards the other side. After what felt like an hour, although in truth it had probably been only a minute, he was hovering over solid ground and ceased his flapping. He fell onto the dirt in a heap. He was breathing heavily while sweating profusely. He had been training with his devil fruit quite a bit but made very little progress. He could turn portions of his body into that of a dragon, but the appendages were strange, hard to control, and exhausting to use. Attempting to turn into a full dragon wasn't much of a better choice either. Whenever he fully transformed, he was overcome with either rage or greed. He felt either an overwhelming desire to gather treasure. Whether it be gold, silver, or anything shiny, he ended up wanting it. Even when in his normal human form, he found himself being more attracted to treasure. He loved it almost as much as meat, which was just wrong, but he couldn't help himself. He just loved shiny things. He had stopped turning into a full dragon after his grandfather had to beat him up to stop him from stealing all the money in Fuchsia Village. This damn fruit has turned me into a fire-breathing magpie, Luffy muttered as he picked himself up and focused on the task at hand. Now where did Ace go? It was tempting for him to use his compass. Ever since Shanks had given it to him, he had found it endlessly helpful when it came to looking for anything. But he wanted to focus on training his senses. Luffy crouched down on all fours and sniffed the ground. His senses had grown far more sensitive since his transformation. His sense of smell, in particular, had significantly increased. He could hunt down anything with his new and improved nose, so he focused on the smells all around him. He could smell rotting vegetation, numerous animals, sweat, blood, and Ace. Ace smells like treasure. That was another thing Luffy found himself able to do more and more of lately. He could smell and sense treasure. Anything golden or valuable he could pick up on either with his nose or through some strange new sense he now possessed. Ever since meeting Ace, the boy always smelled like treasure. Luffy followed the scent through the woods, but soon, the smell of Ace was overcome by the smell of rotting garbage and burning trash, and just about everything smelled like some sort of waste until Ace's scent was utterly drowned out. Not knowing what else to do, Luffy followed the smell until he reached a massive mountain of garbage sitting just outside of a gigantic walled city. Well, as disgusting as this place smelled, Luffy couldn't help but be amazed at its size and majesty. Forgetting about Ace, he quickly set about exploring his new surroundings. He spent hours talking to random people and seeing every inch of this unique place. Luffy learned that this was the Goa Kingdom. He knew about it since it was the main settlement on Dawn Island, but hearing about it and seeing it were two entirely different things. He explored as much as he could until suddenly, his exploration of his new surroundings was stopped by a group of armed men trudging through the trash heap. I hear that Porkami is close to finding Ace and Sabo, one of the men stated as he walked at a brisk pace towards the woods. Good, if we don't find the treasure those kids stole, then Captain Bluejam will have his head and outs. Another rugged man replied. Yeah, let's go finish those brats off. Luffy crouched low to the ground and followed the group of men, hoping they would lead him to Ace and maybe some treasure. Luffy shook those thoughts from his head. Just Ace. I don't need treasure. No sir, I don't need any of that golden, beautiful, valuable treasure. He shook those thoughts from his head. He didn't need to embrace his more draconic aspects right now. He needed to help Ace so that the boy could become his friend and he wouldn't have to be alone anymore. Luffy followed the men to a forested area where they joined another group of men gathered around a massive tree. There were maybe a little over a dozen men, all of them surrounding two young boys hanging from one of the tree's huge branches by long thick lengths of hempen rope. One of the tied-up figures was Ace, and the other was a boy that Luffy didn't recognize. He was a blonde boy with a large hat. I don't have much time. The lead man stated he was a brute of a man with numerous tattoos etched onto his muscled body. I know you two took the treasure that I was going to deliver to Captain Bluejam, so tell me where it is, and I promise to only break a few fingers on each of your hands instead of gutting you where you hang. Never, Ace replied angrily. It looked like he had put up quite a fight before being captured if his bruised and bloody form was anything to go by. If you needed it so badly, maybe you should have protected it better. Brat, the man yelled angrily as he delivered a punch to Ace's face. I'm a dead man if I don't give Bluejam his money, so I've got nothing to lose. If I'm going to end up dying and going to hell, I'm going to drag you two with me. So I'll ask nicely one more time, where is my money? Luffy felt a fit of familiar anger building up inside him. It was the same type of rage he felt in Makino's bar all those months ago. His body moved on its own as he stepped out of his hiding place among the bushes. Let him go. Ace was considering telling Porkami where their treasure was. The man was a monster and would not make empty threats. As much as it pained him to give away the location of his and Sabo's hard, dishonest work these last 5 years, he didn't want Sabo to suffer torture and death over some treasure. Let him go. Everyone's eyes turned to the figure of Luffy standing alone about a dozen yards from where they were all situated. Ace couldn't believe his eyes. That stupid brat from Daten's bandit camp had followed him all the way to the Grey Terminal and was putting himself in danger for him. This isn't your business, Luffy, Ace called out, angry that he had been followed. Go back home and leave me alone. He was cut off from speaking further due to Porkami delivering a vicious punch to his chest that knocked the wind out of his lungs. Who the hell are you, brat? Porkami asked, taking his attention away from Ace. This has nothing to do with you. Get the hell out of here unless you want to be strung up like these two brats. I said to leave them alone. Luffy growled. He was looking at the ground, his eyes covered in shadow. Oi Ace, Sabo spoke up weakly. Who the hell is this kid? A brat from Daten's. Ace croaked as he regained his breath. What's a kid like you going to do to me? Are you going to punch my shins? Porkami let out a laugh that his men were quick to join. You an idiot or something, kid? Get the hell out of here before I kill you. No, Luffy replied, his voice growing colder. Ace felt a chill run up his spine. It was as if his fight or flight instinct had finally kicked in. He had never run away from a fight before, but for the first time in his life, his body was telling him to run. Then you get to join these brats, you little punk, Porkami yelled as he started to approach Luffy. Ace knew Luffy ate a devil fruit. He had seen the boy's skin turn black, had seen the boy sprout a tail, and even a set of wings. But his abilities seemed more like a hindrance than anything else. But now he could only watch as the boy's entire body turned black with dark scales, and his body grew in size until it was as large as a horse, not counting the long neck and massive tail that had numerous spikes along its edges with a massive one at its tip like a spear. You really are a dragon, Ace found himself muttering as he watched the boy change before his eyes. Porkami and his men were in even greater states of shock as they tried to make sense of what they were seeing. What is that thing? It's a dragon. Idiot, dragons aren't real. I don't care what it is. Kill it, Porkami ordered loudly as he drew his blade. Show this creature the strength of the Blue Gem Pirates. One of Porkami's men obeyed immediately and ran at the dragon, attempting to cut it with a saber. However, the dragon used its tail much like a scorpion and impaled the man through the chest with the massive metallic bard that tipped the tail before being flung aside as if he were garbage. Several other men attempted to avenge their comrade, but they were sent flying with a tail swipe that sent them crashing into trees or onto rocks where they lay motionless, burned in hellfire. The dragon then turned to the remaining pirates and let out a massive breath of fire, and Ace winced as the temperature in the clearing rose dramatically. He heard the sounds of screams as numerous pirates were engulfed in flames. They ran about the clearing trying to put themselves out to no avail. The fire burned them until they were nothing but blackened husks. Porkami himself was backing away from the dragon as it approached him, its blood-red eyes narrowed in anger. Stop, Please spare me. I never meant to. He was cut off by the dragon opening its maw and lunging forward, its jaws closing around the man's torso. Poor Kami wailed as he was shaken back and forth before being let go and flung into one of the trees in the clearing, where his body landed in a bloody heap. With all his foes dead, the dragon approached Ace and Sabo. Please don't kill us, Mr. Dragon, Sabo wailed as he struggled against his bindings. You can have all our treasure, just don't eat us. Treasure? The dragon asked, its voice sounding both deep but also light and childish. You have treasure. Where is Ace? Where am I? Suddenly, the dragon began to shrink until all that remained was a very dazed and confused-looking Luffy. On crap, Luffy muttered, eyes scanning the environment around him. I did it again. Luffy looked around at the death and destruction he had caused and felt calm. Is there something wrong with me? He asked himself as he inspected himself while Ace and the other boy had managed to get themselves down from the tree branch. The last time he had killed people, he had been broken up about it. It was only thanks to Shanks that he was able to forgive himself and move on. Now, all he felt was slightly annoyed at having to deal with this entire situation. Before he could consider his situation more, Ace walked right up to him and shoved Luffy back with such force that he almost lost his balance. Why the hell did you follow me? Ace growled like a rabid dog. What is it you want from me, and why did you get involved in business that isn't yours? Luffy cocked his head to the side curiously. All I want is the same thing I've been asking for the last few months, he stated. I just want to be friends. Being alone with those mountain bandits is torture, so I was hoping we could be friends and go on adventures. That's it, Ace yelled angrily. You followed me through woods infested with wild animals, searched through mountains of trash, and killed a bunch of pirates just so we could be friends? Yeah, Luffy replied as he picked his nose. That's what I just said. Are you some kind of idiot that needs to be told something a bunch of times to understand it? He turned to the other boy who had gotten himself free from his bindings and came up to stand next to Ace. I have no idea who you are, but we should also be friends. Okay, the boy replied cheerfully as he smiled, revealing that he was missing a tooth. My name is Sabo. Who are you? And how can you turn into a dragon? Luffy was more than happy to explain and did so with gusto. He told Sabo about Shanks, how he ate his devil fruit, its powers, and about how he was sent to live with Daden by his grandfather. He would have kept talking, but Ace stopped him. How did you even find me? Ace asked as he gestured to the woods around them. Did you seriously track me through the gray terminal in the woods? I sniffed you out. Luffy gestured towards his nose. Ever since I gained the ability to turn into a dragon, I've been able to track things through my sense of smell alone. You were easy to follow since you smell like treasure. My nose is extremely good at smelling treasure. You can smell treasure? Ace asked, his voice filled with evident skepticism. How is that possible? It makes sense, Sabo chimed in. In all the stories I've read, dragons have a nose for treasure in use that sends to gather massive piles of it to sleep on. Yup, Luffy nodded, happy to be believed. He sniffed the air and got a good whiff of treasure. In fact, I smell a great deal of treasure nearby. He began walking around the clearing until he reached the tree that Ace and Sabo had been hanging from. I don't know why, but for some reason, this tree reeks of treasure. You really can smell treasure, Ace muttered. This is great. Sabo cheered happily as he walked up to the tree. This is where Ace and I have been storing treasure and money we've stolen from people here for the last 5 years. We plan on becoming pirates, and this treasure is how we're going to afford to buy a ship and sail out of here. You also want to be pirates? Luffy asked, not believing what he was hearing. Not only had he found new friends, but they also shared the same dream as him. I'm the guy who is going to be the pirate king. Are you now? Sabo chuckled. I like this guy. Ace, we've got to cut him in. No, Ace spoke up angrily. You want us to split our treasure 3 ways. It took us years to get the amount we have. But with his nose and our skills, we can make up the difference and then some. Sabo stated cheerfully as he turned to Luffy. How about it, Luffy? Want to join us in our quest to rob the uppity nobility like real land pirates? Of course, Luffy cried out, excited at the prospect of having 2 new friends and going on all sorts of adventures. Luffy smiled as he counted the latest treasure haul. It sat before him like an ocean of gold, silver, and gemstones. The only way the sight could be even more beautiful was if there was meat mixed in with the treasure. It had only been a year since he had become friends with Sabo and Ace. 6 months since they had shared drinks and become brothers. Yet, it felt like he had known the 2 his entire life, as if they had all been born into the same family and had grown up together. Luffy shook those thoughts from his head as he opened up a black book and started counting the haul. He wasn't sure if it was his devil fruit, his greed, or some new development in his brain, but he had grown extremely good at math, specifically when it came to counting up and dealing with large sums of money. The start of it all had been the issue of taking all the forms of currency they had stolen, the gold, the silver, the bullion, and numerous types of coinage, and turning it into a common value. So Luffy drew up a table that allowed them to do just that. In fact, all forms of money-related math such as compound interest and numerous other things came to him as easily as breathing. The ability to do math hadn't been the end either. Luffy had also taken up reading for fun, the result of his brother Sabo shoving books in front of him as a way to relax, to give him a break from the constant bookkeeping he did for them. Luffy had been skeptical about reading at first. Math and reading had been a necessary evil to him more than anything else. However, Sabo had been right, and reading was fun. His favorite books were ones about pirates, such as the Sparrow Pirate's Adventures, the very books that made Sabo want to become a pirate when he was a child. Using his reading and writing skills, Luffy began to add up the haul and write down its details into the log. As he started counting up the haul, Sabo and Ace joined him in their own personal fort, where they counted up the money before storing it away in a secret hiding place. "I got some more good stuff," Sabo stated as he emptied out numerous pieces of jewelry and coins into the pile. Sabo favored pickpocketing nobles in the Goa Kingdom, and as a result, most of his loot was expensive jewelry and finery. "I got some too." Ace dropped several small gold bars and other odds and ends onto the pile. Ace preferred robbing people by the docks, mainly wealthy merchants and pirates on shore leave. "Wow, great haul, guys," Luffy said as he looked at the various treasures. He had a sixth sense for treasure and could tell the value of something with just a glance. He looked closely at the gold and gave it a big sniff with his nose. 18 carats, with 2 pieces of 22-carat gold, multiplied by 3. And with the common exchange rate, we have a haul of about 20 million billy, assuming we can sell the gold-embroidered silks. It's freaky how you can tell an item's value by sniffing it, Ace pointed out as he leaned against one of the walls of their wooden hideout. "It's cool but freaky. That's the part you find weird?" Luffy asked as he added up all the money and wrote the grand total at the bottom of the page. "Not the part where I can turn into a giant black-scaled fire-breathing lizard. I think that's the cool part," Sabo added as he sat down next to the treasure and began stuffing it into bread bags for easy transport to their hiding spot. "Although it would be cooler if you didn't go on a rampage half the time you changed." "I'm getting better," Luffy argued, although sometimes he wondered if he was. He made very little progress with his hybrid form. The strange combination of human and draconic limbs was hard to balance. His body was simply too small to handle the new appendages. As for his full-size transformation, he had to be of a perfectly calm mind to change into a full-grown dragon. Otherwise, he would run off in search of treasure, hunt animals, or if someone had pissed him off or threatened him or his brothers, he would attack that person wildly. However, he could control himself well when he did transform under calm conditions. He particularly enjoyed flying around the island with his brothers on his back. His draconic torso was just big enough for both boys to ride comfortably. "Well, if you master your devil fruit, then you can become a sky pirate," Sabo said happily. "You could just fly around and rob all the rich people of this world just like a real dragon." "Yeah, I could." Luffy reached over to a nearby bag and produced a beautiful tobacco pipe that Sabo had stolen from a nobleman a few months ago. It was supposedly made from rare wood, and the nobleman used it as a status symbol. It was primarily black with golden designs worked into the wood. Ace and Sabo had tried to smoke with it like they had seen grown-ups do, but it set them coughing. Luffy, on the other hand, found the act of smoking enjoyable. He put some tobacco leaves into the pipe and breathed lightly into it, his breath igniting the leaves. Ace coughed as some of the smoke flew towards him. "I can't believe you enjoy that. Just breathing that stuff makes me feel like I'm inhaling glass and ash." "I like it," Luffy stated as he took a deep puff from the pipe before breathing out the smoke. "If anything, it makes my lungs feel great." After smoking, Luffy always felt refreshed and found that he could breathe better. "I guess it makes sense. Dragons like to breathe smoke, fire, and brimstone," Sabo muttered as he waved the smoke away from his face. "Just don't let your grandfather catch you smoking that thing." Luffy winced at that thought. His grandfather came by occasionally to train him, Ace, and Sabo. His grandpa's idea of training is beating the crap out of them and dropping them into dangerous situations. He put out his pipe and set it aside as he helped Ace and Sabo gather up their ill-gotten gains into bread bags to haul off to their stash. Once the loot was packed up nicely, they took it out of the hideout they made, and Luffy started to transform into a dragon. His body grew long in serpentines. His once pink flesh turned midnight black as scales erupted from his once smooth skin. A massive tail lined with jagged black spikes erupted from his backside. And from his back, 2 enormous night black wings sprouted forth. The wings and tail were always the strangest for Luffy. His Zoan transformation was weird in general, but the new appendages were the hardest to control. He took a few experimental flaps with his wings as Ace and Sabo strapped the loot to his body, securing it with hempen rope before hopping on his back themselves. "All right, Luffy, let's go stash this stuff," Ace called out as he gripped the ropes, using them to secure himself. "Yeah, let's take the scenic route," Sabo added happily. "We always take the scenic route." Luffy grumbled as he began running and flapping his massive wings in an attempt to take flight. "Don't complain. The scenic route is great," Ace called out over the sounds of Luffy's wings. "That's because you get to relax while I carry you." Luffy called out as he took flight and began to soar higher and higher into the air. All his complaints died as he gained altitude and began to enjoy the freedom the sky offered him. Despite it being a long way, he did indeed take the scenic route. He flew over the Goa Kingdom forests, stirring up numerous flocks of birds that flew around him as he flew over the tops of massive trees. Eventually, he entered the northern Corvo mountain range, where he flew up alongside the peaks of the small mountains where numerous mountain goats were prancing upon the rocky cliff sides. Luffy was about to swoop down on one and take it for a mid-flight snack, but Ace yanked on his harness. "No snacks, Luffy. If the goat struggles, we could lose some loot," Ace grumbled out loud. Luffy frowned but obeyed his older brother as he turned away from the mountains and headed towards the ocean. Luffy had always loved the ocean despite never being a great swimmer. Even before eating his devil fruit, he had always struggled with merely staying afloat. When he had eaten his devil fruit, he thought enjoyment of the ocean would always be beyond his grasp now that the sea rejected him. He had never been so wrong about something in his life. Being able to fly nullified whatever weakness he had at not being able to swim. He glided over the surface of the ocean, allowing his bottom claws and tail to dip into the water as he flew over its beautiful blue reflective surface. Numerous fish jumped out of the water before him, and he managed to catch one in his maw and devoured it greedily. Flying tended to make him hungry. All around him, seagulls and albatrosses flew alongside him as his brothers cried out in joy and excitement. Flying was something that none of them grew bored of, and while Luffy would complain about having to haul his brothers on these voyages, he knew that he only enjoyed flying so much because he got to experience it with them. Eventually, they reached their destination. It was a small island made up entirely out of massive rocks where waves beat against its sides constantly, sending up huge waves of white foam into the air. It was a rock where no ship could safely dock, nor would any ship want to since the giant rock held nothing valuable. That's what made it a fantastic place to stash their loot. Up near the top of the rock was a large flat area big enough for Luffy to land. And from there was a cave, small enough to be hidden from view but large enough for two grown men to walk alongside each other. Ace and Sabo hopped off Luffy's back and took the treasure bags off of his sides, allowing him to transform back into a human. The three of them made their way into the cave, which was dark, but that was easily solved by a few well-placed blasts of fire along the walls, which ignited several well-placed torches. Soon the cave glowed brightly as the light from the torches illuminated chests full of gold, silver, and various other bits of shiny treasure that Ace, Sabo, and Luffy had gathered. Ace and Sabo unloaded the bags with their latest haul of wealth and began to sort it and add it to the various chests around the room while Luffy found a comfortable spot in the corner. A large pile of the very best gold, jewels, and various other valuables was put into a vast and disorganized pile in the said corner. Luffy plopped down on top of the pile and let out a tired sigh. Flying always took a toll on his stamina, and nothing soothed him better than a nap on top of a pile of treasure. After sorting the treasure, Ace and Sabo caught some fish from the waters outside and promptly cleaned them and put them on skewers which Luffy cooked with his fire breath. Soon all three were sitting around the cave talking about their prospective futures. "I'll call my crew the Spade Pirates," Ace said, his mouth full of cooked fish. "That seems like a good name." "I don't get it," Luffy muttered as he swallowed a fish whole, bones and all. Ever since eating his devil fruit, he could easily digest bones, gaining nutrients from the marrow. He liked it since it made eating meat easier since he could eat it bone-in. "Why spade? It's like cards," Sabo pointed out as he munched on his fish. "And since her name is Ace, that would make you the Ace of Spades." "You got it," Ace said happily. "Every crew needs a cool name." "Not sure what mine would be," Sabo said as he grew contemplative. "I guess we have years to figure it out. I could try playing up the former noble angle. Something like Exiled Noble Pirates, or Bastard Pirates, or who am I kidding, those names are terrible." They all shared a laugh at that. It had been a little over half a year ago that Ace and Luffy had learned that Sabo was born a noble. They didn't care, of course, he was their brother, and nothing would change that. So they sat around their cave and dreamed about the future, which was filled with endless possibilities. "Leave them alone," Sabo called out as he was dragged away from his brothers by the thugs his damned parents had hired. He couldn't believe they would go through all this trouble just to take him back. Sabo had hoped that between his and Ace's fighting ability and Luffy's devil fruit, they would be able to fight off any foe, but his parents had gone all out. Surrounding his brothers were the Blue Gem Pirates, all armed with swords, pistols, and giant bazookas that could launch a metal ball with a cannon's force. All of them aimed at Luffy as if urging the boy to transform. Sabo saw Luffy was going to transform into a dragon. But with all these guns pointed at him, Sabo wasn't sure if the boy could do it before he was riddled with lead. He couldn't bear to see his brother die before him. "Don't you dare, Luffy," he called out, drawing the boy's attention. "If you do that, I won't forgive you." That seemed to work as he saw his brother back down. "That's enough, Sabo," his father said in a condescending tone. "You will return home immediately. You are my son, and you have to live your life according to your parents who brought you into this world. I won't have these urchins corrupting your mind. They are no doubt just after my fortune. We could care less about your fortune, Ace argued. Sabo is our brother. Be silent, trash, his father replied. I won't have you corrupt, my son, any longer. Blue Gem, get rid of them. Sabo saw the Blue Gem pirates getting ready to execute his father's orders and made a decision. Enough of this, he called out as loud as he could, making his vocal cords ache. I promise to do what you say, Dad. I promise to be a good and noble son, just don't hurt Ace and Luffy. He pleaded. He could sacrifice his dreams if it meant his brothers could live. He heard his brothers protesting, but he ignored them and focused on his father. The man seemed to consider his words and nodded. Very well, son, I'll let the urchins scurry back into the trash and live like the vermin they are. But should you ever run away again or disobey me, I'll have Blue Gem remove them permanently. Understand? Sabo nodded as he continued to ignore his brother's protests. His happiness didn't matter so long as his brothers were safe. Luffy watched as the environment around him turned into a hellscape. Piles of trash burned, and the flames reached up high into the sky. He found it quite pleasant. The smoke made the air nice to breathe, and the heat made him feel nice and toasty. His brother, on the other hand, was on his knees, sweating and coughing. After Sabo got taken away, they had been forced by Blue Gem to place boxes all over the gray terminal, which turned out to be ignitions for setting the terminal alight and burning away all the trash and people living there. Blue Gem had expected to be rewarded for his efforts by being made a nobleman, only for him to be betrayed and left to burn like everyone else. You promised to make me a noble, Blue Gem cried out as he wailed and smacked the gates, desperation evident in his voice as he clawed at the massive gates that led into the Goa Kingdom. Ace and Luffy could only shake their heads and make their escape as Luffy turned into a dragon, and Ace hopped onto his back. As Luffy prepared to take flight, Blue Gem and his men came running up to them. Wait, don't let us burn. We can. Luffy took flight, not even bothering to acknowledge the pitiful pirate. Ace, on the other hand, wasn't of the same mind. Have fun burning. It'll be a nice warm-up for when you go to hell, his older brother called out as they took to the sky. Enjoy your eternal reward, courtesy of the Goa nobles and your own stupidity. They ignored the pirates' cries and left the pitiful men in the gray terminal to burn. They were both tired, but they made an effort to help the people around them. Ace warned people who weren't aware of what was happening, and they even managed to save a few people here and there, but soon they made their way home to Datten, who was outside of her house with some of her men. Luffy and Ace explained what they knew, that the nobility had hired Blue Gem and his pirates to set fire to the gray terminal. There was nothing that could be done except hope for the best. Ace watched as Luffy practiced his hybrid transformations. It was only yesterday that the gray terminal had burned, and life had returned to something resembling normal, albeit normal without their brother Sabo. It had been hard to accept Sabo leaving. It had been evident that Sabo had been trying to protect them. Even so, Ace couldn't help but wonder if the boy was happy. Being born into nobility and living in the Goa Kingdom's noble district had its perks. Perhaps their brother could be happy there. Ace watched as Luffy transformed his right arm into a scaled dragonic once with 5 razor-sharp claws. But the arm was much too big for the boy's young body, and Luffy fell onto his side, weighed down by the muscular scaled appendage. This is why you've never beaten me in a fight, Ace pointed out as he watched his brother struggle. You need to learn to control your transformation better, or grow your normal body bigger for it. You could try encouraging me, you know. Luffy grumbled as he reverted his arm to normal. Sabo would have encouraged me. Luffy paused. Do you think he's happy? Ace scoffed. It doesn't matter anymore. He's made a choice. He is also rich, and he was cut off by the sounds of Dogger, Datten's lieutenant bandit, breaking into the clearing. Sabo was killed, Dogger called out as he came up to Ace and Luffy, joined by Datten and several other bandits who came out of their home to see the commotion. The visiting world noble shot him in the harbor. Ace moved without thinking and pinned Dogger down. What the hell are you saying? There was no way Sabo could be dead. He was safe in the noble district with his family. You're lying. Sabo is with his family. He chose to go back to them and live his life as a noble. I'm not lying, Dogger proclaimed as Ace was pulled off of the man by several other bandits. I thought I might have been hallucinating or dreaming. I doubted my eyes for the longest time, but it was real. Sabo set out with a small boat and flew a Jolly Roger, but he got in the way of the world noble's ship and was killed by the noble. Ace couldn't stop the tears from falling as he realized what a fool they had been. I knew he wouldn't be happy. He sacrificed himself for Luffy and me. And now those bastards killed him. He reached over to where his trusty pipe was and grabbed it, intent on avenging his brother. He only managed to take several steps before he was pushed face first into the ground, and the great weight of Curly Datten was holding him down. You aren't going anywhere, you dumb brat, the large woman shouted as she pushed him down. Get off me. I'm going to avenge Sabo, Ace declared as he struggled against his foster mother's grasp. Always acting so damn tough even though you're just a brat. Daden declared as she held him down. All that would happen is that you would get killed. And the next day the world will have forgotten about you. Who do you think killed Sabo? It was this country, this world. Do you think you can do a damn thing about it? Your father died, bringing in a new age. I won't have you running off until you can do the same. Ace cried as he realized she was right. This entire world had killed Sabo. The whole kingdom was set up to create misery and death. He was weak, weaker than his piece of shit father. There was nothing he could do. Sabo, Ace, and everyone else turned to Luffy, who was on his knees, staring at the ground in absolute sorrow. They killed Sabo, Luffy said, his voice barely above a whisper, but clear enough for everyone to hear him. The world noble, the nobles, this kingdom, this world killed him. Luffy yelled, echoing Daden's words. His limbs thrashed wildly as his body began to shift. Luffy began to transform, but this was unlike any transformation Ace had ever seen his brother go through before. When Luffy turned into a full dragon, his body was the size of a large horse with a massive serpentine neck and tail. However, this time his black form just grew and grew until he was large than the house that Daden and her bandits lived in. He was so large that Ace wasn't sure how big he was. He towered over all of them. Each of the scales on his brother's draconic form was bigger than his body. His brother's scales were each a shield. His teeth were swords. His claws were like spears. His wings were large enough to eclipse them all in shadow. His tail was large and more prolonged than a sea serpent, covered in massive spikes that could impale numerous men, and his maw was big enough to swallow a ship. Ace had read about devil fruits in as many books as he could steal from the Goa Kingdom's libraries. Zoan-type fruit transformations were proportional to their users. Luffy's dragon form had only been as big as a horse because the boy was only 8 years old, and his human body was small, so his dragon body was proportionally small. However, he read that a Zoan fruit user could overcome this weakness by awakening a devil fruit, which allowed them to expand their transformation to make it many times more big with very little to limit them. You've awakened it. They will burn, Luffy proclaimed with a roar as he took flight, an act which sent everyone flying as each flap of his wings was like a hurricane that sent them flying through the air. The dragon left, leaving everyone lying on the ground in shocked silence. Luffy, was all Ace managed to say as he watched the large shadow that flew through the sky towards the Goa King. Suddenly something dropped next to him. It was Luffy's compass, the one he claimed his role model Shanks had given him. He had seen the boy use it to find numerous items as well as pieces of treasure. Ace immediately picked himself up and grabbed the compass. With Daden having been knocked away by the winds caused by the dragon flying off, he was free to sprint as quickly as his legs could manage towards the Goa Kingdom. I've already lost one brother. I'm not going to lose you as well. Author's note. Thank you for the wonderful reception. I'm glad many of you enjoyed the first chapter, and I hope this one was enjoyable as well. First off, I know Kaido's devil fruit isn't called a dragon fruit. It's called the fish fruit. Oda was having fun naming, basing the name on Chinese mythology where a giant carp climbed a waterfall and turned into a dragon. Luffy's fruit is a serpent fruit. I changed it up since Oda uses dragon fruit for ancient Zoan. I know many of you want Romance Dawn for Luffy to start his adventure, but with this new power comes changes to his childhood, and I felt like I couldn't skim over that. I also wanted to play around with the world. I want a butterfly effect that will allow me more freedom, and what happens next will be it. Not much else to say. Luffy's devil fruit has affected his personality in an interesting way. It's technically canon that carnivorous Zoan fruits make a user more predatory and violent. So I figured a mythical carnivorous Zoan would do the same and add other personality quirks like Luffy's obsession with treasure. Please leave a review and let me know how you like this. The next chapter will be an interesting one. Also, if you wish to support me, check out my profile, where you can find a link to a certain patronage site that features both my original and unoriginal work. Supporters of any amount will get chapters a week early. An early preview of Chapter 3 is there now. Still needs editing but still pretty good. Luffy, or rather the beast that had once been Luffy, flew through Dawn Island's sky, its massive body propelled through the air by the colossal wingspan that blocked out the sky from anyone underneath it. Little of the boy Luffy remained, replaced with rage, hatred, and agony from Sabo's death. All that remained was a beast that thirsted for revenge. The dragon within had awakened and would destroy everyone and everything that caused it such pain. Pain, agony, that is all you have brought upon me. The dragon roared as its shadow eclipsed the land beneath it, and each flap of its wings caused a small hurricane. This island heaves with my torment. The wretched Goa Kingdom will quake beneath my rage, and this whole kingdom and all its nobility will burn beneath the shadow of my wings. The monster's eyes saw the Goa Kingdom ahead. Its gaze fell upon the noble district also known as High Town. Even from here, he could hear and see the celebrating in the streets as the nobility celebrated the arrival of the world noble. The dragon swooped down, its eyes set squarely upon the center of all the celebration, the royal palace that sat right in the middle of High Town. Sayuri Nanticanet checked over herself for what must have been the 100th time today to make sure she was perfect. Her servants had spent weeks sewing the dress she was wearing using the best cloth of gold money could buy. She had to make an impression upon Saint Jalmac, the world noble who was gracing them with his presence on this day. At the age of 10, not much was expected of her since most responsibilities of her family fell upon her older brother the crown prince. But if she made a good impression, perhaps the world noble might invite her and her family to attend him at Mary Goi's, where she might catch the eye of a young world noble. As her parents' eldest daughter, all this responsibility fell into her, and she would not disappoint. She watched with excitement as the celestial dragon, one of the creators of this world, walked up to the king and queen, her father and mother, who bowed down and greeted him in front of their royal palace. The world noble had a horde of guards all wearing thick plate armor like knights out of the storybooks her servants read her. It was like a fairy tale come to life. "We welcome you, Saint Jalmac," her father stated as he bowed as low as his body could manage, her mother and brother doing the same. "The Goa Kingdom and all within it are here to serve you. We thank you for the great honor of being able to host you. You grace us with your presence. I hope our humble kingdom is to your satisfaction. It is the cleanest kingdom I've visited since I came down from the Holy Land to see how you humans live," Saint Jalmac said simply. "Clean and proper. I hope the rest of my stay is similarly as pleasant." The compliment was met with great happiness by all present. Sayuri was glad that they had burned away the trash and filth the last night, cleansing this kingdom of the vermin that infested it. Before she or anyone else could say anything else, a massive roar echoed through the courtyard and indeed through the entirety of High Town. The crowds of people who were deemed noble enough to be here in the presence of the celestial dragon were looking about, wondering where the noise had come from. "What was that noise?" Jalmac asked as he gazed up at the sky, where most seemed to think the noise had come from. His bodyguards all drew their weapons as they gazed at the sky, looking for anything that might threaten the noble under their protection. "No clue. Perhaps the heavens themselves are thankful to be in your presence," her father offered weakly, trying to salvage this situation and make things go by smoothly. It seemed to work as the world noble smiled at the compliment. "Indeed, shall we go into your humble palace? I assume you've prepared a feast suitable for one such as me." "Of course," the king declared. "The chefs have worked tirelessly for a week too." Once again, a roar echoed out through the noble district, this time so loud that the beautiful stained glass windows that lined her family's palace shattered, causing shards of glass to fall upon the crowds of people who tried to avoid the rainbow of projectiles as they fell like deadly rain. Before anyone could protest or ask what had happened, the entire noble district fell into darkness. It was as if the sun had disappeared, which should have been impossible since it was noon. Sayuri and everyone else looked up to the sky and could only watch in horror as a massive black shadow fell upon them. An entire procession of nobility who had been standing to the side in the large crowd of onlookers was crushed as a massive object fell into the courtyard. Rock and rubble flew into the sky along with the bodies of those who had been caught in the shockwave of whatever had landed. Sarah herself had to grab onto her mother's leg to avoid being blasted away. Once the smoke cleared, what Sayuri saw struck her with fear. Hundreds of people had been crushed as a massive black creature had landed in the center of High Town. It was a dragon straight from her storybooks, its black scales drinking in the midday sun, and its very presence seemed to darken all of High Town. Its long serpentine tail covered in cruel-looking spikes swayed behind it, crushing buildings and sending people flying. Sayuri wasn't sure exactly how big it was, but she had to look up as far as her head could allow to see its face. Its head was as large as the royal carriage that ferried her and her family through the streets so that they wouldn't have to be gazed upon by the common folk. Its neck was as long as a castle tower, and its sleek black body was like a battleship in terms of size. Its tail's length was beyond her comprehension as it swayed side to side, striking down buildings and people as it moved. It had two long sleek front legs with dexterous claws that it used to balance its massive body, and two massive wings that seemed to block out the sky. "Where is the world noble?" The creature roared as it raised its head and let out a gout of flame into the air. The fire itself was pitch black, and embers from it rained down upon all of High Town, causing every building that the embers touched to catch fire and immediately spread throughout the district. People were spared either as several who were unlucky enough to get hit with an ember erupted in black flame. And no matter what they did to try to snuff it out, the fire only spread. Sayuri watched as the armored knight bodyguards of Saint Jalmac surrounded the celestial dragon as they pointed their swords and spears at the massive creature. The world noble in the white suit that covered him stood tall, seemingly not intimidated by the serpent before him. "I am Saint Jalmac, a celestial dragon," Jalmac called out proudly. "I order you to surrender, creature. I am one of the creators of this world. You will bow before me and submit. All lesser creatures must bow before this world's saviors and creators." The dragon's gaze fell upon the world noble, and his hundreds of bodyguards aimed their spears, rifles, swords, and bazookas at the beast. Sayuri thought it something out of a fairy tale. as the world noble, a saint and living god, would strike down the creature. Kill this hideous creature that refuses to submit to me. Jalmak ordered as all his men opened fire with their ranged weapons, while others charged forth with swords or spears. All around her, the other nobles were running for their lives. Her parents were cowering next to her, frozen with fear, but Sari felt no fear and only excitement as she watched real knights fight a dragon. The rifles and bazookas did nothing to the creature and seemed to bounce off its black scales harmlessly. The knights below attacked with swords and spears, which also did nothing as none could pierce the creature's hide. Sari's wonder turned to horror as the beast ignored the valiant knights and began to approach the world noble. Its large clawed feet were crushing and impaling the knights that it walked over as it approached its prey, its glowing red eyes filled with hatred and hunger. Die, foul beast, Jalmak ordered as he used his own bazooka-like rifle, but its shots did nothing to the approaching black monster. I am a god. No one can defy me. All this world bows to the world's nobility. It was you who killed my brother, wasn't it? The dragon roared as it lunged forward and opened its massive maw filled with teeth the size of giant swords. The world noble was consumed in an instant, his pressurized armored suit popping and letting out a hissing noise as its personal atmosphere leaking out as he was ripped apart by the dragon's massive jaws. The dragon spat out the bloody remains of Saint Jalmak before turning to his remaining retainers and the nobles who still remain. You're the reason Sabo is dead, the dragon shouted as it unleashed stream after stream of black flame throughout High Town. It was only now that Sari felt dread fill her heart. It wasn't supposed to be like this. In storybooks, the hero and his knights slew evil dragons and saved princesses like her. But as she looked around, all the knights were burning. And the world noble, the highest figure in the world, was a red smear on the ground, not even recognizable as having been a person. Help, I'm on fire. The gates are burning. There's no escape. All of Hightown is on fire. My servants have abandoned me. My leg. The fire is spreading to the palace. Sari turned around and saw that the royal palace, which had stood for centuries and had been her home her entire life, began to be engulfed in black fire. She didn't know how it was possible. The palace was made out of stone, but somehow the fire spread across the stonework, and the palace began to melt like a candle would when exposed to flame. She turned and saw that her father and mother were gone. She had no clue where they were, and all the people around her were running back and forth trying to escape the flames. The air grew heavy with smoke as she struggled to breathe. Why? Sari asked no one. Why was this happening? They were nobles, the best of society as decreed by birth. Why were they being burned the same way those vermin who dwelled in the Grey Terminal had been burned? We're nobles, the rightful rulers. Why are we being treated the same as that subhuman filth? Suddenly the dragon let out another roar. But what came out wasn't fire, but instead, a strange green liquid that seemed to melt anything it touched. She watched as numerous people melted as it struck them. Wood, stone, metal, and flesh were all fair game as the liquid turned everything into a green sludge. Just when she thought things couldn't get any worse, it roared and released a purple smoke like mist out of its mouth that spread throughout the area. People who breathed it began to fall over. As they breathed it in, some screamed while others simply fell to the ground clutching their throats as their faces turned sickening colors as they fell over dead. After a while, the dragon simply began to smash things with its barbed tail, and Sari could only watch as all of the high town began to crumble beneath its wrath. Rubble and debris were flying everywhere. Suddenly heat spread across Sari's face as the left half of her face was engulfed in black flame. She had never felt such pain before. Her parents had never struck her, and her servants made sure that she did nothing that could harm her fair features. She tried to put out the fire. Tears fell from her face as she tried to stop the searing pain that engulfed her, but nothing seemed to work. She fell to the ground as the air grew as hot as an oven, and darkness overtook her. Ace walked up to the Goa Kingdom's outer gate that granted access to Edge Town, where the common people of Goa lived, merchants, tradespeople, and other people who had enough wealth to dwell within the walls but weren't of noble blood. The gates were blackened and melted, and smoke filled the air. As he ran towards the Goa Kingdom, he had seen numerous refugees running from it, all residents of Edgetown who claimed that fire had spread from Hightown over to Edgetown and that the nobility of the kingdom had perished in a fire brought by a shadowy monster that fell from the sky. As Ace approached the Goa Kingdom, he had seen smoke akin to the burning of the Grey Terminal, but much more plentiful and foul-smelling, which made him increase his pace. He ran through Edgetown's ruins, which still had buildings on fire. It was challenging to breathe as smoke filled the air and clouded his vision and made him tear up. It was a good thing he was familiar with these streets and knew the back alleys like the back of his hand as he was able to navigate his way over to Hightown. He got to the inner gate and saw at once that things were worse than he could have imagined. The arrival of the world noble meant that no one who wasn't a noble or servant of a noble was allowed within the high town, so the gates had been shut to all commoners. While the gates being shut meant that commoners couldn't get in, it also meant the nobility couldn't get out. He saw the results immediately. The metal bars of the gate were black and scorched. The metal twisted as it had melted from the extreme heat. And behind those bars were the bodies and blackened bones of numerous people who had tried to escape, only to find no way out as they burned to death. He wondered why they hadn't opened the gates, but he looked over and saw all the gates' mechanisms had melted from the extreme heat. Luffy, Ace found himself muttering. What had his brother done? Luffy was so kind and innocent, but his wrath was terrible when he turned into a dragon. He shook those thoughts from his head. None of that mattered. All that mattered was getting his brother. He found one place where the metal had been melted in such a way that his small body could fit under the gate, and he ran into High Town. What greeted him was utter devastation. Barely a building was left standing except for the royal palace, which was no longer a palace but a melted mess, as the stone that had once held it up had seemingly melted, making it look like a melted candle or a badly made birthday cake. All around him were dead bodies in various states. Most were little more than blackened skeletons. Ace pulled out the compass and looked at it. Where is my brother Monkey D. Luffy? He asked in desperation. The compass didn't disappoint as its needle pointed to the west, and he followed it as it shifted here and there until he finally found his brother sitting huddled at the bottom of the walkway to the royal palace. He had his knees clutched to his chest and his head staring at the ground. He could see the boy was crying. Luffy, Ace cried out in joy as he ran towards his little brother and embraced him. The boy hugged him back, but that didn't stop the tears flowing freely from his face. Ace, his brother croaked weakly. I didn't mean to, you know that, right? I just got so angry and, I know, Luffy. Ace comforted his brother as best he could. You didn't mean to do this. They killed Sabo and you ... You just wanted to avenge our brother. But all these people, Luffy sobbed more. Not all of them were bad, right? I just couldn't stop myself. I'm a monster. No, you aren't. Ace pushed Luffy down and looked into his brother's eyes. Would a monster be crying right now? He asked angrily as he gestured towards his brother's tears. Monsters don't cry. Monsters don't feel bad about people they've killed. These people were the monsters. He gestured towards the charred bodies around them. They killed Sabo. They burned people alive in the Grey Terminal and didn't give a damn about it. All that death so that they could impress a world noble. That's what a monster is. A person who feels and cares nothing about the suffering of others. You're not a monster, Luffy. Only a good-hearted person would feel bad about the deaths of scum like this. You are a good person, Luffy. He hoped repeating that statement would be enough to convince his brother it was true. I am, his brother asked, tears still flowing. Of course, Ace soothed, his voice growing softer. I'm your big brother. Have I ever been wrong? I guess not. Luffy's grip and body grew slack as he rested his head into Ace's embrace. I'm tired. He felt Luffy go limp as his body gave out. He used his strength to pick his brother up and lift him over his shoulder. He turned around and saw a cloaked figure standing in his path. The figure was blocking his only way out of these ruins. He gripped the metal pipe he always carried with one hand and held his brother over his shoulder with the other. He considered that he might have to fight his way out of here. All this death and destruction, the cloaked figure stated as it looked around at the ruins of High Town. The power to change the world, both for better and for worse. What do you want? Ace growled as he prepared to protect his unconscious brother. Are you going to stop us from leaving? Depends. The figure responded casually as it looked around at the devastation. What do you plan on doing once you leave this place? Finding a place to hide my little brother, Ace stated, not willing to share more. Brother? The figure asked curiously. The boy isn't of your blood. That statement only made Ace angry. Blood doesn't matter. He gripped his pipe and pointed it towards the strange man. We shared drinks. That makes him my brother, and I will kill anyone who tries to take him. Blood doesn't matter. The strange robed man muttered. I agree and disagree with that statement, but more importantly, you don't need to hide him, although you should take him far away from here. Otherwise, people might start connecting the dots. That statement confused Ace. What do you mean? Stories will spread. People will learn about what my brother did and come after him. No, they won't. The man replied calmly. Tomorrow, all the newspapers of the world will declare that a dragon destroyed this kingdom and slew a world noble. But it will be a dragon of a different sort that they will blame. The figure took off his hood, revealing the face of a strange man, half his face covered in tattoos. I will claim responsibility for this chaos. All those who witnessed the dragon firsthand are dead. Any survivors will have their stories dismissed outright as being too outlandish. The world government will need someone to blame. They always do. I will be that someone. A child as young as him shouldn't be on the run from the government at such a young age. Ace didn't understand why this stranger was doing this. Who are you, and why do you care? I'm just a man seeking out the strength to change this world. The man chuckled as he answered. It's the least I can do for him, all things considered. He pointed at the gate. Take Luffy and run. When next you see Garp, tell him about what happened here and tell him that Monkey D. Dragon will take the blame. Monkey D. Ace didn't understand, but he nodded and ran off with Luffy and looked back at the figure only for him to be completely gone without a trace. Luffy sat in Daden's house as he thought about what had happened earlier. He could only remember bits and pieces, but he remembered being angry, angrier than he had ever felt before. He recalled flying through the air, black fire consuming everything, the sounds of screams, then waking up in Hightown surrounded by dead bodies where he waited until his brother came and got him. Ace had explained everything to Daden and the others. In contrast, Daden had simply been happy Luffy was alive and had hugged him. All the other mountain bandits had kept a safe distance from him, although they had expressed happiness at him being alive. Luffy sat in the corner of the house, looking at his hands while his brother tried to soothe him, telling him that he did nothing wrong. "You didn't mean to do it, Luffy," Ace assured him for what seemed like the 100th time. Besides, they all approved of the burning of the Grey Terminal. They would have killed you without a second thought just because you rent a noble. Remember what Sabo's dad did, how he was ready to have Blue Gem kill us. We aren't even human to them. Ace, Luffy muttered as he looked at his brother. "I am a monster. You aren't," Ace stated loudly. "I keep telling you you don't have to feel bad about it." "That's the thing," Luffy said calmly. "I know what I did was bad, but I feel perfectly calm." He had felt panicked at the time, but now he was perfectly calm as if it was just another ordinary day. It was as if the grief and anger had already passed. "That's good, is it?" Luffy wondered why it was that he was so calm about all this. It had to be his devil fruit. Ever since eating it, he had changed. He never cried anymore when he was sad. Even when Sabo had left, he hadn't cried. Instead, whenever he felt grief, it was quickly replaced by anger. "What if I stopped caring about you? About everyone? I shouldn't be this calm. I killed people, hundreds perhaps thousands, and I feel." It was hard to describe how he felt. He knew what he did was terrible. He knew that he shouldn't have done it. But the grief that had consumed him when he woke up from his rampage had passed. "Am I a dragon or a human?" he asked himself and everyone in the room. "You're my brother," Ace answered finally. "And that's all I care about." Luffy nodded and hoped that he would never make Ace regret saying that. Garp watched his grandson and adopted grandson spar in a field outside of Fuchsia village. He paid close attention to Luffy, who had sprouted a long black tail from his lower back, and utilized it in the fight by using it to strike at Ace while his normal human limbs played defense. So much had happened in the last few months that Garp wasn't sure what to do. He was considering retiring from the Marines entirely with how chaotic things were getting. His grandson lost control and killed a world noble and damn near every noble in the Goa Kingdom's high town. Garp hated the world nobles. It was the main reason he refused to become an admiral, since admirals were at the beck and call of those useless piles of filth. While he wasn't sad that one had died or that Goa's nobles had died, he felt terrible about the innocents who got caught in the crossfire. There was also the fact that his grandson did it after losing control of his devil fruit. He knew Luffy was guilty, but he couldn't bring himself to blame the boy. Perhaps it was paternal instincts that blinded him, but he didn't care. He would keep his grandson's secret and take it with him to the grave. Children shouldn't be held responsible for things beyond their control, and from what he had heard and seen himself, Luffy wasn't in control of himself. If anything, he was at fault for allowing a child with such a dangerous power to live in a place like the Goa Kingdom. If anyone should be punished, it was him for his terrible parenting, Dragon for his terrible parenting, Daden for not watching the boys, and that damned red-haired Shanks for letting a child eat a devil fruit. The incident made him double down on training the boy to control his new power. Zoan devil fruits were tricky, and the carnivorous ones were hard to control, especially for a boy as young as Luffy. Even his longtime friend Sengoku, who had a reasonably calm devil fruit, claimed it was hard for him to control it. It was all too easy for him to go on a rampage during combat, and he was a well-trained man. Garp once again cursed Shanks for allowing his grandson to eat such a dangerous fruit. He had no choice now but to use as much spare time as he could get to train the boy to use the power of his fruit responsibly. He would be training his grandson in the Rokushiki, the 6 powers, to best make use of his hybrid form so that he didn't have to turn into a full dragon, since the boy has difficulty with complete transformation. The last thing he wanted was for his grandson to turn into Rob Lucci. He had to train the boy carefully, but he had such little free time. The destruction of the Goa Kingdom sent shockwaves throughout the world. One of the greatest kingdoms in what was considered the safest of the world's oceans was destroyed by the Revolutionary Army, or so the news claimed. He was glad his son took the blame for the Goa Kingdom's destruction so that Luffy might be spared. Already the world government was doing its best to assuage the people's fears. He didn't even want to think about what this year's Leavely would be like, although he had heard some rumors floating down from the top brass of the Marines. The word was that they planned on expanding the 7 warlord system, giving pardons out to more powerful pirates to increase the world government military power. Some said it would be the 9 warlord system. Garp wasn't sure how he felt about that. He also heard that the Marines would be offering more significant incentives for bounty hunters and handing out privateering licenses much more liberally. Both options made him wince. He didn't much care for bounty hunters or privateers any more than he liked the 7 warlords of the sea. He watched as Ace smacked down Luffy, making it another victory for the older boy. Garp could only let out a tired sigh. Whatever changes the world goes through, I need to make sure these boys are ready for them. He walked over to Luffy, who was picking himself up. You've gotten better with your hybrid transformation. Now let's see the full thing. Luffy looked at the ground. I don't want to, not after. Garp sighed. Look, it's better for you to train to be able to control it. If you shut yourself off from it, then you will lose control the next time you lose your temper. Now transform. If anything happens, I'll be here to stop you with my fists. That seemed to convince his grandson, who began to transform. His skin turned black and body expanded until he was a dragon. However, the boy was only slightly bigger than the last time Garp had seen him transform, with his main body being only the size of a horse minus the neck and tail. I want the full transformation, Garp argued. Ace here said you were as large as a castle tower and that your wings caused hurricanes. I can't. Luffy pouted in his draconic form. This is as big as I can go. Did he only turn so big because of stress? Was it a temporary devil fruit awakening? Garp didn't know much about devil fruits, so all he could do was shake his head. Fine, let's train in that form. For now, first things first, endurance. You're going to let me hop on top of you and fly me around this island 100 times. All you want is for me to give you a free ride. It's endurance training, Garp complained as he hopped onto Luffy's back, the boy barely managing to support the massive man's weight. Now hurry up, I want to fly. Luffy managed to take off with great difficulty, and soon grandfather and grandson were flying around the island. Garp raised his hands up in the air like a child having the time of his life. Do a barrel roll, Luffy, Garp called out as he enjoyed the feeling of flying. I knew this was just for your own enjoyment. Don't talk back to your grandfather while he's training you, Garp argued. Now go faster and fly through those clouds. I've always wanted to taste clouds. 9 years later, Luffy let out the sail of his recently purchased boat as he bid goodbye to the people of Fuchsia Village. The day had finally come where he set out a pirate in earnest. Bye, Luffy, Makino called out. Good luck. Don't become too much of a criminal, Mayor Whoop Slap added. I don't want you to ruin this town's reputation. Numerous others chimed in as they bid him goodbye, and he could only wave back and thank them for their hospitality as he set sail out to sea. Once Luffy was far away, he shifted his sail to the side, intent on taking one last trip around Dawn Island before leaving the island entirely. While he was sailing smoothly along the coast, he decided to take stock of himself. He had modeled himself after what he believed a true pirate should look like based on books he had read with Sabo, such as The Adventures of the Sparrow Pirates. As such, he wore a long black coat beneath that. He wore a simple shirt made of sea cloth. On his lower body were a pair of strong black sea boots, a pair of linen trousers. He had a brown leather belt which held numerous pockets and items strapped to it that he found useful. The first thing attached to his belt was his compass that Shanks had given him all those years ago. Two other items of note were a couple of weapons, the first of which was a pirate cutlass with a gold hilt and a razor-sharp, blackened blade. While Luffy would be the first to admit that he wasn't great with a sword, it was still useful to have one. It also helped him in another way. It helped him satisfy his draconic greed. Luffy discovered he could satiate his own greed and take the edge off the need to take treasure by covering himself in wealth. As a result, his belt had a golden buckle, and attached to it were two holsters that held a pair of flintlock revolver pistols made in the South Blue. Luffy didn't care much for guns, but these ornate weapons were used by nobility back in Goa as status symbols, and he did the same since he could smell how expensive and valuable they were. On his belt, he held his trusty tobacco pipe and a pouch filled with tobacco for when he wanted to smoke. On each of his fingers, we wore golden rings, each with a different gemstone. While they were a bit flashy for his taste, wearing such wealth on his person gave him a feeling of deep happiness and satisfaction. Luffy also wielded a non-flashy practical weapon. While he preferred using his fists, claws, and other bodily appendages, he also favored simple, blunt weapons. He used a slim metal club that he had the Fuchsia Village blacksmith forge by melting down the 3 metal pipes that he and his brothers had used as their primary weapons in their childhood. The club was almost like a traditional kanabo, albeit made out of steel rather than the traditional wood and lacking the spikes or studs such clubs usually possess. He wielded it with some proficiency after constant training with his grandfather and Ace. It wasn't a great weapon, but it held sentimental value, and he planned on having a proper blacksmith forge it into something new one day when he decided what type of weapon he wanted. The only thing he was missing was a proper pirate hat. Luffy knew he would have to buy a suitable pirate hat later since a true pirate captain always wore a cool hat, and hats were generally seen as a sign of a captain. For now, he focused on the sails of his ship. He was currently sailing a decent-sized fishing boat that he bought from one of the village fishermen. It was equipped for long expeditions for travel to the deep ocean. As a result, it had living quarters that could sleep too comfortably or more uncomfortably, a small kitchen, bathroom, and several large storage areas for provisions and storing large amounts of fish. All that was stored were food and water for his journey. He could technically fly between islands, it might even be faster, but he couldn't sleep while in the air, and he would miss out on the authentic pirate experience of sailing a ship. Let's see, Luffy muttered as he thought about what he should do first. I need a good crew, a big one that will put Shanks to shame, but first, I should get a proper ship. He had enough money to buy a good one. Ace had only taken a small share of the treasure that they had gathered in their childhood, which meant he had a cave full of treasure. However, he disliked the idea of spending so much money. He hated parting with treasure, although he knew he had to eventually. He had turned into a frugal individual who hated wasting good money. He still had a decent amount of treasure in his cave, although that amount had dwindled a bit in these last 9 years. Luffy had to give a decent amount to Makino to pay for his debts, with her always giving him food, and he made a point to buy a lot of things in Fuchsia Village to help support the economy. Dawn Island wasn't what it used to be. Ever since the Goa Kingdom incident nearly 10 years ago, times had been challenging for the common man as the entire region's economy shifted due to a complete upheaval of the upper class. As if reality read his mind, his boat was sailing across from the part of the island that held the Goa Kingdom. He could see numerous ships docked at the massive stone docks from his boat where the nobility used to moor their large vessel. Now it mainly was fishing boats and trading ships picking up produce and numerous other agriculture that small villages like Fuchsia grew on the island's substantial farmland. Edgetown had been rebuilt, and those who once dwelled in the Grey Terminal now lived there, while those who had lived in Edgetown took up residence in Hightown as a new upper class, albeit one that didn't consider themselves as nobility. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Luffy found himself thinking. He wasn't sure if he was happy or sad about it. He barely remembered that day's events when he had gone on a rampage, but he promised himself he would never do it again. He had spent the last decade training himself to control his devil fruit powers in his own body so that he would never lose control in such a way again. I'm a man, not a monster, he found himself thinking as his small ship drifted away from the Goa Kingdom and out towards the open sea. Suddenly the water in front of his boat began to bubble, and a massive sea serpent rose from the ocean, its giant maw open, intent on swallowing him. Ah, so it's the Lord of the Coast, he asked as he gazed upon the beast. As it approached him, he allowed his will to be made manifest as he unleashed his willpower upon the creature in front of him. Enough, he roared as his concentrated power of will struck the creature. The Lord of the Coast paused mere yards away from Luffy's fishing boat, its entire body frozen in fear as it felt the full force of Luffy's conqueror's haki as its own willpower died out. Submit, Luffy ordered as he allowed his draconic nature to take over, amplifying his already powerful aura of intimidation. Luffy smiled as he watched the creature freeze in fear. His grandfather had trained him mercilessly these past 9 years, teaching him the Rokushiki style of fighting that many Marines used and also instructed him to use haki. He even discovered that he had Conqueror's haki. His grandfather had trained him in all three, although he still had a long way to go before truly mastering any of them, especially with his grandfather's sporadic training schedule. Luffy shook those thoughts from his head as he redirected his attention to the Lord of the Coast, who stood before him, frozen in fear. Go into the deep ocean and never return to this island. If you do, I will consume you. To emphasize his point, he turned his head and neck into that of a dragon and let out a terrifying roar that echoed over the ocean's surface. The giant fish obeyed and immediately turned the other way and swam as fast as possible until it was out of sight. That should make things safer for the fishermen around here. Now back to my adventure. Luffy smiled as he allowed himself to relax. He pulled out his compass and contemplated where he wanted to go next. He looked at his ship and found it relatively small despite being of decent size. If he wanted a crew, he needed a proper boat for them to stay on. He didn't want to buy one, which meant he needed to steal one like a real pirate. However, he didn't want the Marines after him until he was ready to be a pirate in earnest with a crew, which meant he needed to steal a ship from someone who couldn't go to the authorities, which meant he had to steal from another pirate. So much to think about. It's giving me a headache, Luffy muttered as he pulled out his compass and looked at its needle. Show me the nearest pirate ship I can steal. The compass pointed east, which was where the wind was blowing. Luffy smiled as he unfurled all the sails, prepared to perform his first act of piracy. It's a pirate's life for me. Author's note. A lot to unpack in this chapter. Some of you might love it. A lot of you might hate it, but here it is. I just ask that you hear me out as I explain myself. First off, Luffy is hella powerful. I didn't initially plan for him to have haki at this point, but he is going to need it, and it makes sense that Garp took Luffy's training more seriously after the beginning of this chapter. Second off, destroying the Goa Kingdom, and thus have set forth a butterfly effect through the entire One Piece world. I've done this so that I can play around with the world to make things a little less predictable. The East Blue is forever changed. I'm not saying that the events of canon won't happen, but they will be slightly different. Enemies will be stronger as the world government tightens its grip on the safest of the world's oceans, and that will change everything. Luffy's personality is shifted greatly. He is still fairly simple, but his Zoan fruit has changed things greatly. For example, he is able to overcome grief and guilt quickly, as evidenced by his recovery after the Goa Kingdom's destruction. And unlike canon Luffy, who cried whenever he was in great distress, this version of Luffy gives into his new dragon instincts and becomes enraged. Yes, the Goa Kingdom nobles were massacred, and Luffy is not unaware of how terrible the thing he did was. He simply doesn't see much point in feeling bad over it since there's nothing he can do to change it. What's done is done. He has that aspect of his canon personality intact where there's no point in worrying about something you can't change. Also, I write from character POVs, as you might have noticed. This is to give a limited perspective of events, such as Sari's POV being from that of an overprivileged child. A side note for anyone confused: awakened devil fruit users can grow massive, so I assume they have complete control over their body size, so Luffy's dragon forms will change slightly through this story depending on the situation. In this chapter, he is roughly the size of Smaug from The Hobbit. That's all for now. Thank you for the reviews, and I hope you enjoyed this chapter. Check out my profile if you wish to support my original and unoriginal works. Patrons get chapters a week early. That is easily the most hideous pirate ship I've ever seen in my life, Luffy stated as he looked through his spyglass and watched as a large pink pirate ship with a duck as a figurehead raided what appeared to be a cruise ship for civilian. The sails even had hearts on them, which just looked so wrong. I would rather sail through the oceans of this world on a wooden plank than a ship like that. He folded up the spyglass and put it into his coat pocket and pulled out his compass and looked at it with an accusing glare. I said I wanted a pirate ship to steal, not a pink swan ship. The compass didn't move, its pointer pointing stubbornly at the ship. He had asked the compass to point to the nearest ship he could steal, but he assumed the compass would have some standards. He heard the sounds of gunfire ring out as the pirates began to board the civilian vessel. He was far away that he doubted anyone could see him. He could sprout wings, fly, and save the day, but that's what a hero would do, and he wasn't a hero. A hero would defeat the pirates and give everyone back their stolen possessions. While he was fine with the saving people part, he had no intention of giving anything back. While the ship was of no interest to him, the pirates would no doubt be taking whatever plunder they got and store it with the rest of their treasure, most likely somewhere remote. Luffy smiled as he waited for the ship to finish its plundering. Then it would be a simple matter of following the pirate ship and relieving it of its stolen goods. Nami had been having a wonderful time on the cruise liner she had managed to finagle her way onto. It had been easy to charm the captain and convince him to let her on board along with all the other wealthy guests. She had spent the first day of the cruise picking pockets, sneaking into cabins, and pinching valuable jewelry and other items of great value. While she usually preferred to rob pirates and other bad people, these rich pouch people had more than enough money that her stealing wouldn't hurt them in the long run. It's just a redistribution of wealth, Nami thought as she sat at a luxurious table surrounded by rich men fawning over her and promising her everything under the sun in exchange for her company. Then pirates had to go and attack it, throwing all her plans for a loop. She thought this ship would be safe since it was on a relatively well-traveled route, but pirates were boarding only a day into the cruise. First, there had been cannon fire meant to scare them and destroy the ship's mainmast to make sure that they couldn't escape. Then the pirates began boarding. The massive dining room she found herself in was quite crowded, to begin with, but now it became claustrophobic as the passengers were herded into it by the pirates. She could hear the sounds of fighting outside the dining room. No doubt a few of the security guards putting up a hopeless fight. While many passengers panicked, she stayed calm and collected. After living with Arlong for all these years, she saw all other pirate crews as children playing in a sandbox compared to the likes of the Arlong pirates. Soon the pirates entered. They were common as far as pirates went, unkempt, unwashed, and unimpressive. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are the entertainment," one of the pirates stated as he walked through the crowd of diners, a pistol in each hand. "Tonight's performance is brought to you by the Alvida pirates." As he said those words, one of the security guards came out with a rifle, but the pirate was too fast and gunned him down, causing mayhem to break out as people screamed and ducked for cover. "Anyone else want to heckle the entertainment?" Screams from the frightened passengers filled the dining hall while Nami looked on board as ever. She had grown used to seeing such senseless acts of violence. They were common in her line of work since she often robbed pirates. All she could do was play along and try to drown out the cries and screams of the passengers as they broke down at seeing such a violent act. "No one else better play hero," a deep female voice called out as the deck of the ship creaked and shook. Nami looked up and saw the massive form of a familiar pirate walking along the ship's deck. It was Iron Mace Alvida, one of the most notorious female pirates in all of East Blue. She was a whale of a woman, but whatever one could say about her fat figure, she was as strong as an ox as she wielded an iron bludgeon that few men would be able to wield with both hands. My men will be relieving you of all of your burdensome valuables. So hold them out as they come around, and do not hold anything back, or I'll have my men strip you naked, Alvida ordered as she casually walked around the terrified passengers. Kobe, start going around and gathering the loot. A small boy with pink hair who looked like he was going to fall over from fear at any moment began to talk around with a large sack, and passengers were taking off their jewelry and throwing their wallets into it. When the boy reached her, she started to do the same when one of the pirates began yelling. A marine ship to the north. The pirate lookout yelled, and sure enough, the sight of white sails was present in the distance. There were 3 ships, all larger than the pirate ship. The pirates were outnumbered and outgunned. Damn, Alvida grumbled as she pointed at numerous passengers. Take some of them hostage, in case the Marines try to pursue us to our hideout. Nami was grabbed roughly, as were several others, as they were led away from the cruise ship and onto Alvida's pink monstrosity of a pirate ship. This would be a terrifying experience to most people, but to Nami it was merely an opportunity. I'll let them take me to their little hideout, escape, rob them blind and escape with all the treasure they looted from here and whatever else they happen to have. Nami thought happily as she was tied up and led to the ship's brig, a sinister smile plastered on her face. After the pirates were done plundering the cruise ship, Luffy followed the hideous pink ship for half a day over to a small island, which seemed to act as the pirates' hideout as it had a small dock and even a few buildings located on the island. Luffy decided to think about what he would do next, and while he stared at the island, he whipped out his tobacco pipe and filled it with some tobacco and breathed into it to light it with his breath. He took a deep puff from his pipe, enjoying the feeling of smoke filling up his lungs as he released it into the air, managing to make the smoke he exhaled form a perfect ring as it floated away from him. He had been tailing the ship for what felt like an eternity, and now that he was here, he was racking his brain on what to do. Run in, start burning things, grab the treasure, fly away, profit, were the first thoughts that came into his head. And he might have gone through with it if it wasn't for the fact that the pirates took hostages. Hostages made things a little more complicated. He would have to take out all the pirates if they were to escape and probably help them steal a ship so that they could leave. Luffy took another drag from his pipe and held the smoke in his lungs as he considered his options. His reptilian brain trying to figure out a good plan, but his head started to hurt after a little while. He exhaled and let the smoke fill the air in front of him. Screw it, I'll just fly in and see what happens. No plan survives first contact with the enemy anyway, so why bother overthinking it? He recalled those words from a boring book his grandfather made him read as training. After dropping the anchor of his boat and equipping himself with his weapon, his metal club strapped to his back, Luffy sprouted a pair of large black wings, and with a strong flap from them, he took flight and soared through the air as he headed towards the island. He flew up into the sky and circled the island a few times, trying to get a general layout of the land. It was a simple enough island, a few simple wooden buildings used for storage, plenty of trees, and a dock for mooring a ship. He saw most of the pirates gathering together in a large clearing filled with numerous tables. Even from this distance high up in the sky, he could smell cooking meat. It sent his stomach rumbling, and he realized the pirates were enjoying a banquet, probably as a way of celebrating their recent plunder. I can't do my own plundering on an empty stomach, Luffy said as he found a good place to land. I can't resist a free meal. Nami looked around the prison she was in and couldn't help but chuckle at how pathetic it was. The woodwork was terrible. The cell's iron bars were old, made out of cheap iron, and beginning to rust. These pirates were amateurs. The guards had left to eat and had been replaced by the familiar form of a small shrimpy pink-haired boy who was busy sweeping the hallway outside of the prison cell. She saw he held a set of keys that undoubtedly opened this cell and was about to work her magic when she heard him talking to himself. Stupid Alvida, making me sweep while everyone else eats. The boy muttered to himself as he swept the floor angrily, the broom throwing dust everywhere. The way she treats me. I hope the Marines kill her someday, assuming diabetes doesn't do the job for them. That statement interested Nami as she realized she would be able to manipulate this kid. All she had to do was throw on some of her natural charms, and she would have him eating out of her hand in no time. Psst, she whispered, getting the kid's attention. The pink-haired boy turned to her, a look of confusion on her face. Yeah, you, come over here, I want to talk to you. The boy did as he was bid, albeit very cautiously, and he approached her cell. I heard you bad-mouthing your captain, Nami said smoothly as she put on her most seductive face. She made sure to puff out her chest and expose a bit of cleavage. Anything to manipulate the pirate in front of her. A pirate like you is wasted here. Help me out of this cell and lead me to the treasure room, and I promise I'll make it worthwhile. She gave him a little wink and saw the boy's cheeks flush. I'll even let you join the pirate crew I belong to, which is much stronger than Alvida's. Hell no, I hate pirates. The boy yelled suddenly, causing her to fall back from shock. Be quiet, Nami ordered as she looked around, wondering if anyone had heard him. Are you trying to call everyone on this island to come over here? Sorry, but I just couldn't help it, the boy said sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. If you hate pirates, then why the hell are you serving under Alvida? Nami was genuinely curious about the boy's allegiances. She had hoped she could seduce him into helping her so that she could make a clean getaway with the treasure before betraying him. At this, the boy's eyes became downcast. He related his situation to her, how he had stupidly boarded the wrong boat when he went out fishing and ended up on Alvida's ship, and how he had to become their slave to survive. How the only reason Alvida even kept him around was that he was better at navigation than anyone else on her ship. Nami couldn't help but feel bad for Kobe, whose name she had just learned while listening to his life story. His story wasn't that different from hers. He was forced to join a pirate crew that he hated and was only kept around because of his abilities as a navigator. It struck a chord with her, and she felt like she was looking at a reflection of herself in many ways. I want to leave, but I'm so weak, Kobe cried in evident sorrow. I want to be a Marine, someone who puts bad people like Alvida in jail. But the Marines would never accept a wimp like me. My dreams are as empty as my future. Your dreams are only empty if you give up, Nami stated as she considered his predicament. After pondering his story a bit longer, she decided to help him escape the island so that he could be free after he helped her find all of the island's treasure. I can get you out of here and even help you join the Marines, Nami said, drawing the boy's attention. But first, I need you to help me out of here so that we can steal some treasure and a ship. Luffy walked across the island like he owned the place, and his confidence seemed to work since the pirates seemed to consider him as just another member of their ranks. It wasn't until he got close to a clearing filled with tables, benches, and umbrellas to block out the sun did someone finally stop him. It was a muscled man wearing typical striped pirate garb with a blue bandana around his head. Oi, I don't recognize you. Are you one of the new recruits who came on over from Shell's town? The burly man asked as he blocked Luffy's path. No, I'm from Dawn Island, Luffy replied casually, too distracted by the scent of food to really care about what he was saying. The man nodded as if that explained everything. I didn't know we were getting new guys from Dawn Island, but it makes sense. Heck, even our captain is from Dawn Island, a former noblewoman if you can believe it. Still, lots of people going pirate after the Revolutionary Army leveled the Goa Kingdom. Even if the seas are more dangerous, bounty hunters and privateers are sailing all over the place. A man can hardly make a dishonest living anymore, eh? Yeah, times are tough, Luffy answered as he looked over to where the food was. So when do we eat? We can eat now, but mind your table manners. Lady Alvida expects everyone to eat with dignity, even if she doesn't necessarily do the same herself. Still, there be plenty of food. We raided that cruise ship's food stores and got enough food to last us all a month. Luffy needed no further encouragement as he was led to a massive table piled with food. There were many pirates already seated going about their meals at a leisurely pace. Luffy took a seat next to several pirates and began stuffing his face. The pirate had spoken true, and there was tons of food, and all of it was high-class stuff. It made him slow down for a moment to savor a few dishes and consider the fact that he would need a chef on his ship as well as a navigator. If I had a chef, I could eat food like this every day, he thought to himself as he tried a seafood pasta dish. His fishing boat wasn't big enough to have electricity or refrigeration, so he had been eating ship's biscuit, salted meat, and whatever fresh fish he could catch with the ship's fishing gear. He didn't mind since he wasn't the pickiest eater, but eating fresh food after being at sea for so long made him realize what he had been missing. As he sampled the various dishes, he listened to the pirates all around him as they spoke about this and that. Living in Fuchsia Village had a certain isolating effect, and he was interested in what people living on the seas were talking about. Privateers and Marines everywhere these days. If it weren't for Lady Alvida smashing all our enemies, we would have been dead years ago. Yeah, I heard a new group of privateers is roaming around. Got demons in their crews. Last I heard, they were near Orange Town looking for pirates to hunt down. They're everywhere these days. Even Don Krieg allied with a bunch of other big-time pirates in order to fight off the Marines and privateers, strength in numbers and all that. He formed the largest fleet in all the East Blue. Heard he's got 2 big-time pirates under his command with bounties of 10 million and more. Well, I heard he extended an invitation for Lady Alvida to join. She refused outright. I'm glad she's keeping us out of that mess. That many pirates together paint a massive target on yourself. Got to plunder everything in sight just to feed a fleet that large. Luffy listened and soaked in the info, but eventually, his hunger grew larger than his desire to listen, and he refocused on the food as he saw the meat dishes being brought out. He grabbed a large piece of meat and stuffed it into his mouth. When he ate, he automatically activated his Zoan fruit instinctively. His teeth became razor sharp, allowing him to chew through anything, and he crunched through the meat, bone in. Oi, stop that, the man sitting next to him ordered. Yeah, that's gross, and Lady Alvida won't like it. You'll choke. What are you, his mother? Who cares about him choking? If Alvida sees, we will all be in trouble. Luffy ignored them. He hated it when people talked to him when he was eating. He continued to stuff his face as he drowned out the chorus of voices directed at him. Suddenly a loud voice rang out that he couldn't ignore. Who is this disgusting man? His table manners are ruining my appetite. Luffy looked up and saw a large woman standing before him. She was probably the largest woman he had ever seen, and she was holding a massive spiked iron club with one hand while eating a piece of meat with her other. Before Luffy could say anything, his new dinner compatriots began to speak on his behalf. "We're sorry, Lady Alvida," one began. "We tried telling him to eat more dignified, but he wouldn't listen. He's a new recruit from Dawn Island," the big pirate from earlier pleaded. He didn't know the rules. Luffy watched with only the tiniest bit of interest as the enormous lady glared at him. "Dawn Island? Huh. Are you a beggar from the Grey Terminal or a criminal from Edge Town? I guess in the end, it doesn't matter. I'll let you off easy so long as you can answer one question," the enormous woman stated as she glared at Luffy. "Tell me, newcomer, who is the most beautiful woman on all the seas of this world?" Luffy grabbed another piece of meat and shoved the entire thing into his mouth as he wondered who the heck this lady was. He turned to the pirate sitting next to him. "Who is this big chunky lady?" he asked in between bites of his food. Silence reigned as if time itself had frozen. All the people seated at the numerous benches were looking at him with wide eyes and their mouths hanging open. He looked back at the woman and saw she was getting red in the face. "Why, you little," the woman began, but was stopped when a man ran over to the picnic area. "Lady Alvida," the new arrival cried out, drawing everyone's attention. "Someone was found stealing from our treasure vault." "What?" the woman roared as she turned to the man. "Everyone, head over to the docks. If someone has stolen our treasure, then the only way out of here with it is on one of our ships." Everyone began to run to the docks except for Luffy, who looked at all the food sitting in the now abandoned picnic area as he considered his options. The treasure being taken away was terrible news. It was his treasure to steal, not someone else's. But at the same time, all these tables were filled with food which needed to be eaten. Food or treasure? Luffy thought as he looked at all the fantastic food around him. It was like trying to choose which arm to cut off. His human desire to stuff his face, or his draconic desire to steal the treasure, both were fighting each other. "I choose both," Luffy stated as he began his complete transformation. Black scales covered his body as his limbs grew clawed and massive. He felt two huge horns sprout from his head along with a large spiked tail. Over the years, he had learned how to control his full dragon form, but most importantly, he had learned how to control its size and how to control himself. For now, his body grew to the size of an average-sized ship. He was easily as large as the pirate ship he had followed here. It was large enough to do what he needed to do. With his new massive size, it was easy to devour every single piece of food present, and within 30 seconds, he had shoved every single bit of food into his massive maw, along with several tables and benches. After eating everything in sight, he sniffed the air, and sure enough, to the east of the island, he smelled humans and treasure. He reverted to his human form and stamped his foot on the ground a dozen times in an instant. Shave. Nami cursed herself for her greed. If she had just grabbed what she could and left, she would be safe at sea with a good deal of treasure. It had been easy to hijack one of Alvida's smaller ships and break into the treasure vault. But moving the treasure between the ship and the vault took multiple trips. Even with Kobe's hesitant help, it had taken a long time. If she had just taken one trip, she would be at sea with Kobe. But in her greed and despite Kobe's protests, she had made several trips and had been spotted by a pirate who alerted the rest of the crew. She was cornered by the treasure vault, with Kobe cowering behind her as numerous pirates surrounded her with drawn blades. In each of her hands was a flintlock pistol, and she was aiming them at the pirates, which was probably the only reason they had not charged her. None of them wanted to be the ones to get shot. "Drop the guns, you're surrounded, little girl," one ordered as he pointed his cutlass at her. "You aren't going anywhere," another added. "It's over, Nami," Kobe muttered. "There's no way out of this. I've gotten out of worse situations," Nami said, although that had only been half true. She could lie and swindle her way out of most situations, but this one was a doozy. She could lie and claim Kobe was behind it all, that she was a pawn in all this, but it was a long shot. And even she had trouble with her conscience in selling out someone who pirates had effectively enslaved. "Surrender now. We would hate to harm such a pretty face," one of the pirates stated, a lecherous grin plastered on his hideous face. "Whose face is pretty?" a booming female voice called out, drawing out the sounds of all the other pirates. All the pirates panicked as the massive lumbering form of Alvida strode up towards Nami and Kobe. "Surely you were speaking of my face, weren't you?" Alvida asked as she glared at her underlings. "Of course, Lady Alvida," all her underlings chorused together. "No one in all the seas has a face as beautiful as yours." "Indeed," Alvida agreed as she glared at Nami before her eyes fell upon Kobe. "Kobe, have you betrayed me?" Kobe muttered, apparently unable to form a coherent sentence. Nami considered her options. If her opponent was a man, she might be able to seduce him or sell Kobe out to survive. But against someone like Alvida, her chances were slim. Her best bet was to gun the woman down and run for the boats in the confusion. Not a great plan, but at this point, all her other options were gone. Kobe, Alvida shouted once more as she glared at her indentured servant. Tell me who is the most beautiful woman in all the seas. Nami had to resist rolling her eyes. How conceited could one woman be? It had to be some sort of coping mechanism. Kobe stuttered until Nami heard him whisper to himself, I'm dead anyway, might as well speak the truth. He cleared his throat before answering. Anyone but you. Kobe roared as he pointed at Alvida. You're the ugliest person I've ever met. That goes for your looks and your personality. If you had a sister and a dog, I would choose the dog. You little bastard, Alvida roared, hefting her iron mace. Nami couldn't help but laugh, even if she was about to share the same fate as Kobe. Looks like you found your bravery right before the end. She could see Alvida was about to lead a charge and attack them. Nami pointed both pistols at Alvida as she prepared to open fire before making a mad sprint for the nearest boat. Suddenly, a young man clad in a black coat appeared in front of her from seemingly out of nowhere, making her take her fingers off the pistol's triggers. All right, where's the treasure? He asked as he looked around his surroundings before his eyes fell upon Alvida, who was just as shocked by the new arrival as Nami was. Oh, it's you, the chunk lady. How are you doing? Is there any way to greet the most beautiful woman in the world? Alvida roared as she glared at the newcomer, her previous target forgotten as she focused her anger upon the newcomer. Right, sorry, Makino would be ashamed of my lack of manners. The stranger answered as he turned to her before bowing to her politely. Hi, my name is Monkey D. Luffy. What's your name, Miss Chunky Lady? Alvida's face was so red that it looked like a giant overripe tomato, and Nami could only watch in horror as the female pirate lifted her impossibly large mace and prepared to attack the mysterious stranger. You rude little ingrate, Alvida yelled as she brought her mace down upon the boy. Iron scales, the boy called out as his body suddenly turned black and his skin turned into scales. His body also seemed to tense up right as Alvida's mace smashed into his head. The sound of metal hitting metal rang through the clearing as Alvida stumbled back from the recoil of her strike. That won't work on me, the stranger stated as a long black tail sprouted from his lower back and a pair of large black wings. When I use the technique my grandpa taught me along with my dragon scales, no blade or mace can get through, except for my grandpa's punches, the boy stated as he laughed merrily. Nami could only state in shock as what appeared to be a half-human, half-lizard boy shrugged off a strike that would have killed anyone else. The pirates seemed to share her shock as they panicked at seeing their captain's attack fail. Impossible. No way. No man can survive our captain's strength. What are you? Alvida finally muttered as she regained her footing. To look like that and survive my attack ... You've partaken of the sea devil's power, haven't you? The devil fruits are real, one pirate exclaimed. He's a monster, another added. I thought they were a myth. Nami was just as surprised as all of them were. She had heard of devil fruits, but this was her first time seeing one in action. The stranger simply shrugged. Okay, you hit me once, now it's my turn. The boy's right arm suddenly grew large, black, and heavily muscled, and his fingers turned into claws with razor-sharp ends. As if, Alvida roared as she swung her mace sideways, intent on clobbering the man. However, her mace strike was stopped when the stranger in black grabbed her mace mid-swing with his clawed appendage. Before anyone could even register what had happened, he squeezed the massive mace, and the strong metal cracked under his grasp until it shattered entirely, not giving Alvida a chance to recover. The stranger reared his arm back from the now shattered mace and delivered a solid punch to the woman's stomach, which sent her flying through her underlings and to the other side of the island, where she disappeared from sight. The rest of Alvida's men turned tail and ran after their captain. Okay, now for my treasure. The stranger turned to her, and she finally got a good look at his face. He looked remarkably average. The only thing of note about his face was a scar under one of his eyes. Oh, hello there, he said as he gave her a little wave. Hi, Nami said, nothing else coming to mind as she processed the insanity that had just unfolded in front of her. You saved us, Kobe spoke up, coming out from behind Nami's back. You have the power of the sea devil. Yeah, I do, the man replied. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, nice to meet you. Likewise, Nami answered, feeling very awkward in all this. I'm Nami, a thief that steals from pirates. Thanks for your help. No problem, the boy said, although it seemed more like a question. I just came here to steal the treasure from these pirates and steal a better ship. But I think I would rather sail a dinghy than any of these eyesores. Luffy pointed to the docks where several ships were docked. Alvida's main ship. Then there was a smaller one shaped like a heart and several small vessels meant for only one or two people. Nami couldn't help but smile and feel a golden opportunity to present itself to her. A strong, capable man who also stole treasure from pirates. Well, as I said before, I'm a thief that steals from pirates. In fact, I was in the process of stealing Alvida's treasure. She gestured to one of the smaller boats, which was loaded with bags of treasure. Maybe we should team up. I could use your strength when stealing. We can split everything 80/20, sound fair? No, Luffy answered as his gaze fell upon her treasure. Unless, of course, that 80% is for me. But right now, all I see is a girl and a boy standing in the way of my treasure sitting in my boat right there. He pointed at the boat that she had loaded with treasure. Nami rolled her eyes as she gazed at her treasure. I can't spot your boat or your treasure, she replied sarcastically as she made a show of looking pointedly at her treasure-filled boat. Must be a tiny little boat holding a tiny amount of treasure hiding somewhere behind my boat. Nami, this guy has the power of the sea devil, Kobe muttered as he hid once more behind her, his earlier courage gone. Just let him have the gold. Listen to your sidekick, Luffy replied. I'm a reasonable person, 50/50 split, and we shake on it. Never. Nami wasn't going to give away half of her treasure. The East Blue was a dangerous place these days, and her ability to find treasure to free her village was growing more and more difficult. She couldn't afford to give any more away. Her village was counting on her. Possession is 9 divided by tenths of the law. And seeing as how I'm in possession of the treasure right now, it's mine. Nami expected a comeback, but instead, Luffy's form turned black as he began to grow. His body shifted to become longer, bigger, and more serpent-like until she was gazing at a roughly 50 meters tall black dragon. Its massive maw filled with teeth as sharp as swords and 2 massive devil-like horns sprouting from its head, along with a tail covered in black spikes and 2 massive black wings on its back. Now then, the monster began as it brought its face down to her level until she was face to face with its massive head and its jaw that could swallow her whole. Each breath the creature took blew back her hair, and the temperature of the breath was sweltering as she immediately began to sweat. What were you saying about my treasure? It's a real dragon, Kobe muttered as he began to cry. Nami gazed at the dragon before her and stood her ground, her greed and desire to save her village overcoming her desire for self-preservation. I said it's my treasure, she put forward, mustering all her willpower. I'm willing to give you an 80/20 split in my favor so long as you're willing to work with me to steal more treasure, she stated with all the courage she could muster as she stared death itself right in its face. Seconds passed by, although they felt like hours as she waited for the dragon to respond. Suddenly the coast was filled with laughter as the dragon reared back its head and laughed. The dragon cackled. You're the best. I'm ... the best, Nami asked, utterly confused at this development. Suddenly the dragon began to shrink until Luffy was standing before her in his human form, still laughing. Shishishishi. Luffy started to get his laughter under control to a mere chuckle. In all my life, I never imagined I would meet someone greedier than I am, he stated as he finally reined in his laughter. A thief that is greedier than a dragon. That is amazing. So we agree that all cash bully is split between us 80/20 in your favor? Those are your terms. Nami nodded, her voice failing her. Her agreement made him smile as he held his hand out to her, which she accepted, and they shook on their new deal. Welcome to my crew, Luffy said as they concluded their handshake. Nami felt a huge relief as her survival seemed guaranteed and that she gained a new ally until she realized he said the word crew. Crew? What do you mean, crew? Well, I'm alone right now, but I'm trying to assemble a crew so that I can go on adventures across all the seas of this world and find the world's greatest treasure, One Piece, and become the Pirate King, Luffy answered enthusiastically. Now that you've joined my crew, I can call myself a pirate captain. That boy behind you can be a ship's apprentice, I guess. I'll have to whip him into shape, though. If he's sailing with me, he needs to toughen up. There's no way I'm teaming up with a pirate. Nami back away from him as if he were tainted. I hate pirates and would never associate with one. The pirate cocked his head to the side and seemed utterly confused. But, you're a pirate, aren't you? Of course not. In her entire life, she had never felt so insulted. I don't steal from the poor people or slaughter people. I'm a thief who steals from pirates. Well, I don't steal from poor people, and I generally try to avoid killing people, Luffy answered. Also, weren't you stealing from the people on the cruise ship? That's why you're running off with all the treasure, right? Yeah, Nami, Kobe spoke up. I remember on the cruise when Alvida forced me to take people's belongings. You had a bunch of jewelry and multiple wallets stuffed into the folds of your clothes. That's different, Nami protested, defending herself from this obvious character assassination. They were rich and ... It's not really stealing from them if I'm stealing from pirates, right? Also, just because I'm a thief, that doesn't make me a pirate. Legally, it does, Luffy pointed out as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. My grandfather made me read a bunch of books on laws, regulations, and other boring marine legal stuff. Suppose you steal from pirates and don't turn the stolen goods into a marine or other law enforcement official. In that case, you are considered a pirate legally due to profiting from piracy, even if done so indirectly. The only exception is if you are a warlord of the sea or a fully licensed privateer sponsored by an influential individual or government body. Even then, you have to give 25% of whatever you took from the pirates directly to your sponsor. He is technically correct. Unless you turn in all this treasure to the marine base, then you are legally a pirate, Kobe added unhelpfully. It's considered an act of piracy, whether you consider yourself a pirate or not. You stealing from people on the cruise ship would also be considered an act of piracy. Nami was speechless as she processed this information. Well, I don't care what the law says. I'm not a pirate, nor will I be a crew member of one. You gave me your word. Luffy began, his voice severe but soft. We had a deal. You get the majority of the treasure and team up with me. If you go back on your word, I'll take all of this treasure for myself since we aren't crew members. You prepared to fight me for the treasure. She wasn't. There was no way she would win, so she came up with an alternative solution. Let's just say that for now, we are temporary crew members. She put forward, if anything, she could find a way to profit from his raw strength. And if I enjoy being your crew member, then I will consider joining you permanently. A complete lie. There was no way she would join a pirate, but she might as well give the boy some hope. Okay, the boy agreed, his previous serious demeanor gone, replaced with one of pure optimism. You guys stay here and gather the treasure on the docks. I'll fly over to my boat and bring it in for us to load the loot. Nami and Kobe obeyed him, and soon they had the treasure of Alvida's pirates loaded onto the relatively large fishing boat that Luffy used as his vessel. They also went about releasing the other hostages Alvida had kidnapped and sent them on their way in one of the smaller boats that were docked nearby. The three of them boarded Luffy's modest fishing vessel once their business was concluded. While nothing special, it was a remarkably comfortable ship, and soon the three of them were out on the open ocean. Nami sat on a lounge chair and allowed herself to relax. But the pillow the chair had was stiff, uncomfortable, and rustled with an annoying clinking sound. What is up with this pillow? She asked as she opened it up, only to find it filled with gold coins. She couldn't believe what she was seeing and grabbed a coin and bit it to make sure it was real. It was solid gold. Why are your pillows filled with gold coins? I'm not complaining, but this is weird for lack of a better word. I can only get a good night's sleep if I have a bunch of gold nearby, Luffy stated as he unfurled the sails. And don't even think about it. As a dragon, I have a sixth sense that allows me to keep track of treasure. There are exactly 267 coins in that pillow, and if I find one missing, there is no place in the world where I won't be able to sniff you out. You can sense treasure. Nami couldn't believe it. Then again, this was a man who could turn into a dragon. Sense it, smell it, and overall, keep track of it really well, Luffy answered in a bored tone. Now, if the questions are over, I'll be heading to Shell's Town. There's someone there I want to recruit into my crew. He was going to be the first person I asked, but I guess he'll be the second. That's perfect, Nami replied as she carefully set aside the coin-filled pillow. I promised Kobe I would help him join the Marines. And Shell's Town has a pretty big marine base on it. You want to be a Marine? Luffy asked as he looked at Kobe with an appraising eye. Yeah, Kobe muttered, his confidence at an all-time low. I doubt I'll make it past basic training, though. Well, I can send a message to my grandpa, Luffy said as he pulled out a compass and adjusted the sail. He is a pretty important Marine. I bet he could whip you into shape. He trained me since I was old enough to walk, and I came out okay. Your grandpa is a Marine, and you want to be the Pirate King? Nami asked as she wondered what kind of messed up family Luffy was from. That must make family dinner pretty interesting. He is always trying to get me to become a Marine. Luffy shook his head. But I'm going to find One Piece and become the Pirate King. Impossible, Kobe interjected. Every pirate in the world is looking for that treasure. Millions have lost their lives seeking it. You'll probably end up dying. It's my dream, so I'm not afraid of dying for it, Luffy put forward confidently. So confident, Kobe muttered. If I was that confident, I could be a great Marine. I always dreamed of throwing people like Alvida into jail and protecting the weak. It's a good dream, Nami said as she looked at Kobe, who seemed to be growing more confident. Just promise to look the other way if you ever see me stealing. I'll give you a 5-minute head start to run away before I chase you, Kobe joked, and they all shared a light laugh. So, Nami began, who is it you're trying to recruit in Shell's Town anyway? Luffy smiled. The pirate hunter Zoro. I've heard about him even in my remote village. He seems like he would make a good first mate. Unless you want that job. First off, that's the stupidest idea I've heard all day. You want to recruit a known pirate hunter into a pirate crew. That's like trying a flock of canaries trying to recruit a cat, Nami explained, unable to understand Luffy's train of thought. Second off, I'm not interested in being your first mate. I'll settle for navigator and treasurer. Nami's right, Kobe added, his voice trembling. Roronoa Zoro is a bloodthirst devil. I heard he is only in Shell's town because the Marines captured him because he was such a menace. Well, I still need to see what kind of person he is, Luffy replied nonchalantly. I want a cool crew. One with all sorts of people. A crew that will be 1,000,000 times better than Shank's crew. It's your funeral, Nami added as she leaned back on the lounge chair. If he kills you, I'm claiming all your treasure. Alvida picked herself up from where she had fallen. Her entire body ached as she moved her limbs to get herself up. All around her were her followers, her crew who were looking at her expectantly. Lady Alvida, thank goodness you're all right. Those bastards stole all our treasure. What are we going to do now? Are we going to raid more ships? With your iron mace, we can easily make more money. Go away, Alvida roared as she looked at the pitiful men that surrounded her. Today's events had lit a fire within her, one that would make her begin anew. All of you get out of my sight. I hereby disband this pirate crew. What? Her followers asked in unison. You heard me. Alvida pointed to her massive ship. You lot can take the Miss Love Duck and do whatever you want. Continue pirating. Become fishermen or sail it into a sea king's mouth for all I care. But I want you all out of my sight. They began to protest, so she picked up the remnants of her iron mace, which was little more than a metal stick with a bit of jagged metal at the end, and waved it around threateningly, and sure enough, like cowardly roaches, her men scattered, crawling into her pirate ship and sailing away. Alvida stood alone on the island that she had called home for years. She was prepared to leave it all behind in pursuit of something else. She walked over to the docks where her other ship sat docked, the Heartseeker, named because it was in the shape of a heart. While not a large ship, it had the advantage that it only needed one person to crew it. It was the ship she had used to set out from her hometown to become a pirate. She had kept it all these years mainly for sentimental reasons, and for that, she was glad. She entered the ship's living quarters. Inside was a bed, dresser, mirror, and several metal chests. It was here that she kept for more personal treasures, items she wanted to keep away from her old crew. She reached for a small chest laid on the ground and opened it up, revealing within it a pink fruit in the shape of a peach covered in strange swirls. It was a devil fruit, one she had found early in her pirate career and kept hidden in her old room to keep it away from prying eyes and sticky fingers. She had kept the mysterious fruit around as a curiosity and trinket. She never had much use for one until now. She had earned her bounty and infamy with her sheer strength and courage. But today's events had changed all that. Monkey D. Luffy. She purred as she remembered the way he had struck her. She could still feel an ache in her abdomen where he had landed his blow that sent her flying. All her life, men had been intimidated by her. Ever since she was a little girl, the boys would run from her, avoid her, or even insult her, so she put them in their place with her strength. They had all been intimidated by her strength, her beauty. They just couldn't deal with the fact that she was a strong, beautiful woman. Even her parents rejected her and wanted her to be a dainty little thing to attract a rich husband to increase their social standing. She rejected that, and she used her strength the only way she could think of and became a female pirate captain. As a captain, no man could match her. Her iron mace brought down every marine, privateer, and bounty hunter that came after her, and her own crew scurried to fulfill her every whim. Luffy had been the first man to hit her or even stand up to her in any meaningful way. A man worthy of her. With a man like that by her side, someone she could truly rely on, then there would be no stopping her. She recalled his attire, the cutlass, the pistols, the black captain's coat. He was surely a pirate or at the very least a sailor. With someone like him by her side, they would be unstoppable. To impress him, I need to get stronger, Alvida muttered as she looked at the fruit before her. She had no idea what power it held, but surely it would make her stronger. Strong enough to grab the attention of the only real man she had ever met. She grabbed the pink fruit and swallowed it whole, nearly vomiting it back up when the taste hit her, but she gathered her willpower and kept the fruit down. Suddenly her body was burning. Was eating the fruit supposed to be painful? She let out a silent scream as her entire body seemed to burn. It felt as if her flesh was being burned off of her body. The pain was so horrible that darkness overtook her as she passed out. She had no idea how long she had been out, but when she came to, it was night, and she had to fumble around for a light. Finding a lantern, she lit it and brought it up to a nearby vanity and looked at herself in the mirror. My freckles are gone, she exclaimed as she looked at her face. She was still as beautiful as before, but she lacked freckles, and her skin seemed extremely smooth. Alvida had no idea what power she had gotten, but she had time to figure that out later. She tried to walk out of the room but tripped over her own feet. She looked down and saw that her clothes were suddenly far too big. It was like she was wearing a circus tent around her body. Had her devil fruit affected her clothes somehow? She considered her situation and checked herself more closely. On top of her skin feeling smoother, she also felt lighter. Did the devil fruit make her stronger and more agile somehow? She shook those thoughts from her head. She had to make up for the lost time. Luffy could be anywhere by now, and she had to find him. She managed to gather some clothes that would fit her, got out on the deck of her ship, and set sail for the nearest island. As she steered her ship, she allowed herself to enjoy the feeling of the ocean breeze as she sailed towards her destiny. It reminded her of a song she used to sing back when she was a young girl watching ships come into port near her old home. Back when she dreamed of meeting a strong man, a strong sailor who would be worthy of her. Alvida smiled as she began singing her old childhood song. Upon one summer's morning, I carefully did stray down by the walls of Edgetown, where I saw a sailor brave. His hair was done in ringlets, his eyes were as black as coal. My heart did seek him, for he was a sailor bold. My father is a merchant, and the truth to you I'll tell. And at the top of Hightown, in opulence, I once dwelled. His fortune did exceed 300,000 gold. And he frowned upon his daughter because she wanted a sailor bold. But a fig for his riches, all his merchandise, and gold. For I seek out a jolly sailor bold. I fled from his riches, and in poverty doth dwell. Turning my back on Hightown and all that I had known, I set out to sea, with not a piece of gold, intent on finding my jolly sailor bold. Alvida ceased her singing as she thought of Monkey D. Luffy, the first real man she had met since leaving Hightown and the Goa Kingdom behind at the age of 14. An act that saved her life since her family and everyone she had known was most likely dead after the Revolutionary Army leveled her old home. She never did bother checking to see if they survived. They had been dead to her long before that. If she had stayed, she would have been dead regardless of whether or not the Revolutionary Army had come. She was little more than a clockwork doll for her parents to use to advance their social standing. She had lived in opulence, eating only the finest of foods and attending the fanciest parties. She had hated every second of it. The idea of marrying some weak nobleman had disgusted her. She loved seeing the real men at the docks, and she knew that she would find true love out at sea, so she set out as a pirate. Being a pirate had exposed her to numerous men, but they had all been weak disappointments until now. Alvida smiled as she thought of some new verses to the song she used to sing as a young girl. My name is Alvida, I was once a merchant's daughter fair, and I have left my parents and 3,000 gold a year. My heart is pierced by Cupid, I disdain all glittering gold, now that I have found my jolly sailor bold. As Alvida finished singing her latest verse, she reached up to her chest where Luffy had struck her and let out a wistful sigh as she looked around her at her ship, the Heartseeker. Let's see if this ship lives up to its name. All right, here we are, Luffy called out as he, Nami, and Kobe arrived in Shell's town. It was a fairly decent-sized island that acted primarily as a base for marine battleships to dock and resupply. After docking their fishing vessel, the trio walked into the town center, which was bustling with activity. All right, Nami began as she looked around. I've kept my promise. Kobe, it should be easy enough to enlist as a marine here. Thanks, Nami, Kobe said. I owe you big time, you too, Luffy. If it weren't for you, we would have died back there. Probably, Luffy replied as he took out his compass and opened it up. Where is Roronoa Zoro? What are you doing? Nami asked as she looked at the compass. You're asking a compass for directions to Zoro. A compass that as far as I can tell doesn't point north, making it utterly useless. Silence, non-believer. The compass knows all, Luffy stated with the utmost confidence. The compass Shanks had given him had led him to numerous treasures and allowed him to escape countless bad situations. This compass is my greatest treasure, and it has never failed me. He looked at the compass and followed its directions through town as it guided him through the streets until he was standing outside of the town's main marine base. Luffy walked right up to what appeared to be a walled courtyard. Luffy found the entrance, and at the center tied to a wooden pole was a man. He wore dirty clothes, a black bandana, and appeared to be on death's door. That's him, Kobe muttered as he came up alongside Luffy. It's the demon of the East Blue, the pirate hunter Roronoa Zoro. He looks dangerous, Nami muttered. This is the guy you wanted to recruit. Yup, Luffy answered as he looked at the near-dead pirate hunter. He had heard numerous villagers back home in Fuchsia talk about Zoro, how he was a deadly swordsman and the strongest man in the East Blue. It made Luffy want to recruit him. If he was ever going to surpass Shanks, he needed strong crew members. Not wanting to wait anymore, Luffy walked over to the entrance of the execution grounds, only for Kobe to stand in his way. Don't go in, the young boy pleaded as he pointed to a wooden sign next to the entrance. Read the sign. If you go in, you'll be arrested. Luffy looked at the sign and read it. By order of Captain Morgan, anyone aiding this prisoner will be arrested and charged with the same crimes as the condemned. Luffy opened his mouth and let out a breath of fire that burned the sign to ash in a matter of seconds, leaving behind only a tiny pile of ashes. I don't see any sign, he muttered as he walked into the courtyard. He looked back and saw that Nami and Kobe were keeping their distance. He wasn't sure if it was out of fear of Zoro or fear of punishment for breaking the law. In the end, it didn't matter. He was here for Zoro. He walked up to the pirate hunter who had just looked up and seemed to be appraising him with cold, calculating eyes. What are you doing here? Zoro asked weakly. His voice was hoarse and sounded like he was choking out each word. Are you here to free me? Maybe, Luffy replied simply as he walked right up to the pirate hunter. Well, if you free me, I'll pay you, Zoro said weakly. I can hunt down a criminal and give you the reward money. I've been tied up here for 9 days without food or water, and I'm almost at my limit. 9 days? That's impressive. Luffy was impressed. 9 days without food or water was torture. He wasn't sure how the man was still alive without water after so long. How are you still alive? Zoro chuckled, although the man seemed to regret it instantly as he began to hack and cough dryly. A stubborn enough person can survive just about anything. And I can't die until I accomplish my dream. Upon saying this, he descended into a coughing fit. Here, Luffy reached for his belt, grabbed his trusty flask filled with grog, opened it, and held it up to Zoro's lips. The pirate hunter drank greedily, although, after a few sips, he stopped and glared at the flask. What the heck is this? The green-haired man asked as he licked the liquid from his lips. Grog. It's water with a bit of rum and lemon juice. It prevents scurvy, is sterile, and hydrates you. Luffy answered simply. Don't like it. I prefer stronger booze. But I'm not picky right now. Zoro quickly emptied the flask and let out a tired sigh. So, you're going to free me, right? That depends, Luffy answered as he attached his empty flask to his belt. I intend to be the Pirate King, and I'm looking to recruit crew members. I was thinking about having you join me. In that case, leave me tied up, Zoro answered with a dismissive grimace. I have no intention of becoming a common criminal. I have my own dreams, and I don't intend to abandon them to follow some idiot living out a pirate fantasy. You do realize you're tied up at a marine base, under arrest for what I assume are crimes. That makes you a criminal, Luffy replied as he took stock of the situation. A temporary problem that I have well under control. Luffy looked at the man's sorry state. And more than that, Zoro smelled awful. So your idea of under control is being tied up, starved, dehydrated, and judging by your smell, you've been pissing in your pants. I don't even want to know what out of control is like. It's not like I have a bathroom out here. Zoro yelled defensively as he strained against his bindings. It doesn't matter what you say. I'm going to be the world's greatest swordsman. I don't have time to go sailing around the seas playing pirate with a guy who thinks he can be the Pirate King. Luffy smiled when he heard Zoro's words. The Pirate King would need the world's greatest swordsman on his crew, Luffy answered. So let's get down to it. What would it take for you to join my crew? Before Zoro could answer, a young girl walked up to them. She gave Luffy an appraising look but quickly ignored him in favor of Zoro. Big brother, I brought you some rice balls, the girl said as she offered a couple of rice balls to the pirate hunter. I made them just for you. Get out of here, kid, Zoro growled. If they catch you here, they will. What's going on here? A voice called out, drawing everyone's attention to the entrance to the courtyard. Standing at the gate flanked by 2 guards was a blond young man dressed in a black suit and sporting a ridiculous haircut. You all better explain yourselves, or I'll tell my dad that you've broken into this place. Can't you read the sign that warns people away? Luffy smiled as he looked at the strange man. I didn't see any sign, Luffy replied smugly. Are you blind? The sign is right. The stranger stopped as he looked at the empty space where the sign once was. Some idiot must have moved it. Regardless, you should be obeying me. I'm Homepo, the son of the man in charge of this base. If you don't listen to me now, I'll tell my father that you were breaking the law. Luffy watched as the weirdo walked over to the 3 of them flanked by 2 marine bodyguards. I'm feeling merciful today, so get out of here before I have my men here throw the 2 of you out. This man is a condemned criminal who has to be punished for defying me. It took all of Luffy's self-control not to punch the man in front of him. Instead, he chose to approach the situation like Shanks would have, trying to find a peaceful option. Look, I don't know what Zoro did, but most laws that don't involve murder or piracy can be resolved with payment of a fine. How much would it cost to bail Zoro out of this? An island should have a big office and a magistrate, mayor, or judge that I can talk to. He knew enough about laws and regulations from his grandfather's endless lessons on being a marine. Luffy was glad those lessons were paying off now. Helmeppo smiled cockily. Are you a family member of his come to bail him out? Well, it's too bad. That scumbag killed my dog, and he's being punished for it. Your dog was a vicious wolf, the little girl cried out. It tried to attack me, and Zoro protected me by killing it. Luffy knew he wasn't the smartest sword in the armory, but he was beginning to piece things together. He wondered why Zoro, a man well known for hunting down criminals, had been thrown into jail. Now it was becoming apparent. Zoro had been thrown in jail for defending a little girl from a vicious dog owned by a scumbag with a powerful father. This situation was beginning to remind him of his childhood in the Goa Kingdom. This guy was no better than those scumbag nobles. Stupid girl, spouting a bunch of nonsense, Helmeppo complained. I can do whatever I want, and my pets can do whatever they want. That's why Zoro here has to be punished. Listening to this guy talk gave Luffy a headache, so he decided to try again for a peaceful solution. Look, this sounds like a personal thing, so let's settle it here. How much to get Zoro released from the stocks? Don't interfere, Zoro cried out angrily. I have a deal with this guy. If I survive for 30 days like this, then I go free. The second those words left Zoro's lips, Helmeppo began laughing uncontrollably to the great confusion of everyone present, most especially Luffy. "What's so funny, helmet hair?" Luffy demanded, wanting to know what the heck was going on. After several seconds, Helmeppo got his laughter under control and had a look of smug satisfaction on his face. "I was going to save it as a surprise. But I guess it can't be helped. In 3 days, Roronoa Zoro will be executed. He signed his death warrant the second he killed my pet. I only agreed to this because I found the idea of him starving himself out here more amusing than him sitting in a jail cell." "You lying bastard." Zoro struggled against his bonds, but he didn't accomplish much other than hurting himself. "You promised, big brother." The little girl cried out, clutching the rice balls to her chest. "You truly are a dumb ape for believing such a lie. But I've enjoyed watching you suffer." And Helmeppo never got to finish speaking because Luffy lunged forward and struck the man with a vicious right hook, sending him flying back into the wall of the courtyard. Helmeppo held his jaw as he cried out in pain. "You bastard." The boy yelled angrily. "No one ever hit me before, not even my own father. Guards, execute this man. Do it now, or I'll tell my father." Luffy grabbed his metal club with his right hand as one of the guards advanced upon him, a sword drawn and ready to strike. The Marine took a horizontal swing at Luffy's head. Rather than dodge, Luffy turned his teeth razor sharp and lunged forward, catching the blade in his mouth and biting it in half. The Marine jumped back and looked at his now ruined sword, his eyes as wide as dinner plates as he realized what had just happened. Luffy spat the shards of metal from his mouth and swung his club horizontally, and struck the Marine in his side, causing him to fly across the courtyard where he landed in a heap, knocked out cold. The other Marine bodyguard drew his rifle and aimed it at Luffy. "Die, you monster," the man yelled as he pulled the trigger. "Too slow," Luffy muttered as he used observation haki to sidestep each of the bullets. He casually walked up to the man, who eventually ran out of ammo and could only stare at Luffy in fear as the boy delivered a strike that sent the man flying across the courtyard, landing next to his other unconscious ally. By this time, Helmeppo had picked himself up and trembled as he watched his guards get knocked out quickly. "Assaulting a Marine is a capital offense. I'll have my father." "Shut up about your father." Luffy's temper was at its limit. He used his free hand to grab one of the flintlock revolver pistols from his belt and aimed it at the annoying daddy's boy. As he aimed, he felt the presence of someone approaching him. "Luffy, stop." Nami's voice called out, though he could barely hear it as he set the gun sights directly on Helmeppo. As he pulled the trigger, Nami's slim hands grabbed the gun, causing the shot, which would have gone straight through Helmeppo's chest, to veer off its course and miss entirely. "That scumbag isn't worth shooting. Let's just get the hell out of here before the Marines come down on us," Nami demanded as she took the pistol from Luffy's hand. Luffy's rage wasn't so easily quelled as he tried to step forward. "Let me just break his legs. Let him crawl to his precious father." However, Kobe was holding him back along with Nami, and while he could have easily thrown the two of them off, seeing the both of them hold him back forced him to calm down. It reminded him of when his brothers would hold him back as a child whenever he was on the verge of transforming into a dragon and going on a rampage. "You haven't seen the last of me," Helmeppo called out as he ran out of the courtyard, still clutching his wounded face. Luffy freed himself from Nami and Kobe. He turned to Zoro, who was still struggling against his bonds as the little girl tried to untie him, although her small hands were unable to undo the solid hempen rope that restrained the pirate hunter. "Roronoa Zoro," Luffy began as he drew his cutlass and, with several slashes, undid the ropes that bound the pirate hunter. "Have you reconsidered my offer? I'm going to be the Pirate King, sailing through the Grand Line where the strongest pirates in all the world rule the seas. I need the world's future greatest swordsman by my side in order to claim the One Piece." Zoro chuckled as he picked himself up, an act that seemed to take every bit of strength he had. "I guess I'm a criminal no matter what after today, and I owe you one for saving me." He gave Luffy a stern look before continuing. "I'll follow you, but let's make one thing clear. I am going to be the world's greatest swordsman. If you do anything that gets in the way of that goal, you'll end your own life on my sword as an apology. Deal? Welcome to my crew." Luffy felt the rage from earlier dissipate at this wonderful turn of events. "Well, let's get out of here before we have to fight our way out of here." "Not yet," Zoro declared stubbornly. "I need my swords. One of them is special to me. That bastard Helmeppo has them somewhere. I won't leave until I get them back." He took several steps forward only to collapse to his knees in exhaustion. "I'll get them. You need to rest," Luffy declared as he stretched his body out as he prepared to transform. "You also need to eat something. You've been starved for over a week." "I have rice balls," the little girl declared, making her presence known once more. "I made them special for you, big brother. It was my first time, but I think they turned out great." Zoro accepted the food and took a big bite, and winced as he swallowed one. "They're very sweet." "Thank you, Rika." A blatant lie, although it seemed to delight the child. Rika smiled. "Yep, I love sweets, so I use sugar instead of salt. Please eat them all." Luffy turned to Kobe, who was standing next to him. "Hold on to this for me." He tossed his club to Kobe, who caught it, although he struggled with its weight. "Why do you need me to hold this?" Kobe asked as he tried to heft the metal weapon. "You need to protect the others while I'm gone," Luffy answered as he grew a set of large black wings. He ignored the amazed shouts of Zoro and Rika and took flight into the sky. He sniffed the air, and sure enough, he could smell the helmet-haired boy's scent coming from the top of the marine base. "Now to find some swords. I am great," Captain Morgan muttered to himself as his men finished raising his statue. It had taken years, but it was finally done. With the tributes he got from the townspeople, he was able to get the best artisan in the area to make a perfect replica of himself towering over the marine base. Some people complained, saying it was a vanity project, but he ended their lives with his famous axe hand. Couldn't they see the value in this? All would know that this marine base was under the command of Captain Axe Hand Morgan by erecting it up high to watch over the town. No pirate would ever approach this place. It was he who captured the infamous Captain Kuro. He didn't remember the fight very well, but he remembered the black-clad monster that cut down an entire marine ship's personnel only for Morgan to persevere and capture the man. The only thing that kept this moment from being perfect was his worthless son yelling at him. "The man hit me, father. You have to kill him. Even you never hit my beautiful yet masculine face. Do you know why I've never hit you? It's because I'm your precious son that. It's because you're a worthless son not worth hitting." Morgan struck his son, sending the boy flying across the top of the marine base's highest tower. "I'm the great one here, not you. Why should I care if someone disrespected you? Now shut up and let me enjoy my moment of glory." He gazed once more at the statue of himself and was almost about to shed a tear of joy when suddenly a young man clad in black appeared on the shoulder of the statue. His sudden landing caused the statue, which had only just begun to level itself after being planted, to fall over and break in half as its top half fell off the side of the building. Morgan felt his hopes and dreams shatter as his glorious statue was destroyed in front of him. Everyone, including himself, was frozen in shock, and silence filled the air until the boy in black landed on the ground next to the other half of the statue and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "Sorry about that," the boy said, breaking the silence. "That's the man who hit me," Helmeppo cried out. "You bastard, you destroyed my father's statue." "Your father's statue? In that case, I'm not sorry at all," the boy replied before disappearing and reappearing next to Helmeppo as if he could teleport. "But you're coming with me. You need to show me where Zoro's swords are." He disappeared down the staircase with Helmeppo in tow. Morgan got over his shock, and the anger hit him full force as he turned to the Marines around him. "Don't just stand there," he roared, pointing at the door. "Capture that man and bring him to me alive. I'm going to execute him personally." Luffy followed Helmeppo's directions and found himself in a lavish little office near the top floor of the marine building. The office was filled with gaudy decorations. He could smell the wealth that filled the room. There were suits of armor, swords, valuable silks, and various other riches used to decorate the office. It took all of Luffy's willpower to stay focused on the task at hand. He looked down at the man-child he held and saw that Helmeppo's eyes had gone white and his body limp. He had seemingly fallen unconscious out of fear. Luffy dropped him roughly and gazed around the room, looking for Zoro's swords and doing his best to ignore all the expensive decorations that adorned the office. His gaze fell upon a set of knight's armor that shone beautifully as if it were made of silver. Luffy sniffed it and found that it only had a tiny amount of silver in it, just enough to make it shine. "I love full-body armor, even if it isn't expensive." There was just something about full-body armor that appealed to him. Sadly, his own dragon scales were stronger than any armor he could find or buy, making armor fairly pointless. His attention was then drawn to a group of swords sitting next to the armor. Numerous blades of all styles and sizes were present, making Luffy's task of finding Zoro's swords that much more complicated. Luffy had always loved swords, but he was never very good with them. He could swing, dodge, and block with swords just fine, but his lack of finesse made swordsmanship a challenge for him. Not knowing which sword was Zoro's, he decided to follow his nose. He sniffed the air, and sure enough, there was one sword that stood out from all the others. Lying in the corner of the display area were 3 katanas lying next to each other. The one that smelled valuable was the central one, a beautiful blade in a white sheath. Luffy drew the sword, and despite knowing nothing about swords, he could tell it was an amazing blade. He could feel the power emanating from it as if it were a person that he was using observation haki to sense. The sword seemed to have a spirit. He could sense power, hope, will, and a desire to rise. He didn't know if it was the blade he was feeling or the leftover feelings from the blade's previous owners. Before he could inspect the blade more, he heard a commotion coming from outside and looked out the window and saw Marines led by a massive man assembling the courtyard where Nami, Kobe, Zoro, and Rika were. Luffy grabbed the 3 katanas and sprouted a pair of black wings from his back, and he took flight and flew out the window of the office and toward his friends. Zoro grimaced as Axe Hand Morgan and his subordinates formed a battle line as the Marine soldiers aimed their rifles at him and his new companion. The orange-haired girl whose name he didn't know was hiding behind the pink-haired boy who was holding up the metal club Luffy had given him in front of him as a makeshift shield. "Rika, get behind me. When the Marines fire, you need to run away as far as you can. Understand?" Zoro asked as he forced the child behind him. She nodded even as she fought back the tears as she got behind him. "So you're Roronoa Zoro?" Morgan asked as he waved his axe prosthetic around menacingly. "I've heard about you, but before my great strength, you are just garbage, as are the rest of you. Trespassing on this property is a death sentence." The Marine captain turned to his men. "Ready, aim." Zoro grimaced as he prepared to make his last stand. If he had his swords, he might have had a chance. If he hadn't been starved for over a week, he might have had a chance, but fate wasn't kind to him, so he braced himself for what was coming. Fire. The firing squad opened fire. However, before the bullets could strike him and his new companions, a massive black shadow fell from the sky and landed in front of them, blocking the shots and kicking up an enormous cloud of dust and dirt. When the dust cleared, it revealed a figure that Zoro identified as Luffy, although the boy had undoubtedly changed. To start with, Luffy had grown taller and buffer to the point where he was taller than Morgan, who was already a monster of a man. Luffy's hair had grown longer with it falling around his shoulders, and he had two black horns protruding from his skull. His eyes were yellow with slit-like pupils, and parts of his skin, such as parts of his face, were covered in pitch-black scales that seemed to drink in the light of the midday sun. His arms were now covered in black scales, and his hands were now dexterous claws, as were his legs. From his back, a pair of wings out, their scaled forms being used to block the bullets that had been meant for Zoro and the others. Behind Luffy's back, a massive tail covered in spikes wagged side to side. "I think one of these belongs to you," Luffy said as he tossed Zoro 3 katanas which he immediately caught. His shock over the boy's appearance faded away as he grasped his swords, the tools he would use to achieve his dream, and a reminder of his promise. "They all belong to me," Zoro replied as he inspected his blades to make sure they hadn't been messed with or gained rust while in Helmeppo's custody. He could hear the Marines shouting in surprise. "He's a fruit user. I thought they were amiss. What do we do, Captain Morgan?" "Guns are useless against him." "Then use blades," Morgan ordered angrily, making the Marine soldiers draw their blades and make a desperate charge at Luffy. "This form is a bit too large and unwieldy," Luffy muttered in a bored tone as he inspected his body. "Life return, martial body." Upon saying those words, Luffy's body began to shrink, and his muscles became thinner until his form was much slimmer with proportions similar to an average human, although he was still quite tall, being around 7 feet in height. It appeared as if he was about to move against the Marines attacking them, but Zoro stopped that. "Leave this to me." Zoro placed a sword in his mouth and drew the other two. And using what little strength he had left, he charged forward and blocked all the blades of the charging Marines before they could strike Luffy. The Marines froze as he held them all back with practiced ease. Zoro couldn't help but smile upon seeing their terrified faces. "If any of you move, I'll cut you down right now," he threatened. "That won't be necessary. They'll be going to sleep," Luffy said happily. Before Zoro could question what Luffy was talking about, the air grew thicker and heavier as an overwhelming shockwave crashed into him and all those around him and behind him. It was as if a powerful surge of energy struck at his heart, his very will, and tried to overwhelm it. While it hadn't hurt, it did make Zoro uncomfortable. But what shocked him most was the fact that all the Marines he had been holding off all collapsed to the ground, as did numerous others that surrounded Captain Morgan. Morgan and about 6 Marines were all that was left standing, and each of them appeared to be breathing heavily as if they were only just holding on to consciousness. "What the hell was that?" Zoro asked as he turned towards Luffy, who was merely smiling. "Just a little battle of wills to make sure no one had to die," Luffy answered before gesturing to Morgan, who had regained his bearings. "Although one of them still seems like he's willing to fight." Captain Morgan was done with sending his underlings at them as he charged at them, his massive form shaking the ground as he hefted his axe hand up, ready to strike them. Zoro hefted his blades, but Luffy stepped forward. "I'll handle this, you need to rest." Zoro was tempted to protest, but he accepted Luffy's offer. He was curious to see how Luffy would deal with this. "I am the Marine Captain Axe Hand Morgan, the greatest man in this base. I will execute you all criminal scum," Morgan cried out as he charged at them in a blind rage. Luffy simply shook his head at the declaration. "Storm Tail," he called out as he seemingly whipped his tail in Morgan's direction. The tail struck out with such force and speed that it created a blade of compressed air that flew forth and struck the Marine captain down before he could even reach Luffy's position. Morgan didn't seem to be getting up, and it appeared as if the battle was over until a shrill voice cried out from the other end of the courtyard. "Everybody freeze." Zoro and Luffy turned to see Helmeppo holding a gun to the orange-haired girl's head, and Zoro cursed himself. He should have been watching the others while Luffy dealt with Morgan. "I'm warning all of you," Helmeppo yelled desperately. "I'll blow her head off if you don't surrender." "Luffy," the girl cried out, "you're supposed to protect me. You're the muscle in this operation." You should drop the gun, Luffy replied casually without a hint of worry in his voice. You're the one who is about to get hurt. What are you talking about? Are you some kind of idiot? Helmeppo asked. I hold all the cards, and he was cut off after the pink-haired boy from earlier struck him over the head from behind with the metal club Luffy had given him earlier. Don't threaten my friends, the boy cried out as he kicked the gun away from the now unconscious Helmeppo. Good job, Kobe, Luffy declared happily before turning towards the remaining Marines. Zoro also turned to the half-dozen remaining Marines. If you guys are going to arrest us, then come on over. We'll take you on, he declared as he prepared to finish this for good alongside his new allies. Instead of fighting, the Marines all threw their weapons into the air and began to cheer and celebrate. Morgan is defeated. We're out of Morgan's control. Long live the Marines. Hey, both Zoro and Luffy asked in confusion as they watched the Marines celebrating. Everyone hated Morgan, Kobe cried out happily. There's no more need for any fighting. Good, Zoro muttered as he sheathed his swords before allowing equation, starvation, and the fatigue from his recent exertion to overtake him as he fell to the ground and darkness overtook him. Luffy was relaxing in Shell's town bar, which Rika's family ran as he and his crew ate to their heart's content. That was a great meal, Zoro declared as he cleaned off another plate. 9 days with no food almost killed me, Luffy chuckled. Then there's no way you could have lasted a full 30, he replied as he finished off his own plate and added it to a nearby stack, one that towered over Zoro's. A human shouldn't be able to survive more than 3 days without water, Nami chided as she took a drink of some orange juice. The fact you lasted 9 is freakish. Makes me wonder if the rumors about you being more beast than man are true, Kobe added nervously. Water I can live without. It's the booze I missed. Zoro turned to Rika's mother. I'll take your finest alcohol, preferably sake. Anything for this town's saviors. The bar owner replied as she went about preparing more food and fetching Zoro his drinks. As they all ate and drank their fill, the bar doors opened, revealing the form of the Marine commander who had taken charge of the island after Morgan's imprisonment. Luffy could sense that the man was both happy and nervous, and soon he found out why. I'm Commander Ripper. I wanted to thank you all on behalf of the Marines in this town, Ripper stated in a formal tone. The former Captain Morgan is currently residing in our jail awaiting his court-martial. While I'm thankful for your help, I am curious as to exactly who you people are and what brings you here. Luffy was tempted to declare himself the next Pirate King and dare the Marines to do something about it. However, this town had seen enough fighting and conflict, so he opted to be vague. I came here to recruit Zoro onto my crew to aid me in a quest of sorts. And what quest is that? Ripper asked. To reach the Grand Line. Ripper let out a tired sigh, clearly growing frustrated with the exchange. I'm going to cut to the chase. Are you a criminal with bad intentions? A pirate, as it were. I'm a simple man trying to make his way across the East Blue, Luffy answered as he pushed his plate away. But if it puts your mind at ease, I have never raised a Jolly Roger or robbed anyone on the open sea, which are the primary ways one can be legally condemned as a pirate according to the Marine Guidebook Section 3, which covers maritime law. Ripper frowned as he considered Luffy's words. That's a vague answer. Your knowledge of marine regulations is also suspicious. My grandfather is a Marine and forced me to read every single manual and guidebook he could shove in front of me. Luffy was growing tired of this conversation and wanted it to end already. Also, you shouldn't ask questions you don't want the answer to. Ignorance is bliss, as my grandfather always says, and he's the most blissful person I know. Ripper chuckled as he seemingly allowed himself to relax. In that case, behold my blissful state. Sorry for the interrogation, but I needed something to write in my report to headquarters. Your answers are enough for me. As for you folks, there will be no charges held against you for anything that transpired here. If there's anything I can do to assist you, please ask. I'm afraid we don't have much in terms of money thanks to Captain Morgan spending our budget on his vanity projects, but I'll scrounge up whatever I can as a reward. Luffy knew he should simply wave his hand dismissively and say that the town's thanks were enough and that he didn't need a reward. That's what a hero would do. Heroes didn't need to be rewarded for doing the right thing. But the fact was that Luffy wasn't a hero. He was a pirate, or at least an aspiring one. Well, I require a ship. My fishing boat is getting crowded. Aside from a ship, we need provisions and any money you can offer. I know you guys don't have much, but I did spy some nice expensive items in Helmet Hair's room in the Marine base that looked quite expensive. Luffy looked over at Kobe. Also, this guy wants to join the Marines. Let him join up. Ripper frowned as his gaze fell upon Kobe. While I'm willing to overlook many things, having someone of unknown origin join the Marines is something I can't overlook. I'm a man whose dream it is to be a Marine, Kobe declared, speaking up for himself. As for my background, I'll be honest. I was taken as a slave by pirates and only escaped because of Luffy and Nami. I'm tired of being a weakling. I want to become a Marine to make sure no one has to suffer the way I did. I don't care how hard I have to work, even if it's just doing dishes and scrubbing latrines. Silence filled the bar as Ripper seemed to soak in the boy's words. Very well, but you'll have to work extra hard to get rid of those who might be suspicious of you. Even working for pirates against your will is normally considered a disqualifier for joining the Marines. But exceptions have been made in the past. Report to the base at dawn tomorrow. Yes, sir, Kobe declared, giving his best salute. Ripper turned his attention towards Luffy. As for your other requests, I think we can help you. Helmeppo and Morgan's belongings were already going to be seized. Passing them on as a type of reward should be easy enough. As for a ship and provisions, there might be one I can offer you. Report to the base at dawn tomorrow with your friend, and I'll have something set up. Once the commander left, everyone breathed a collective sigh of relief and went back to their meal. As Luffy continued eating, Kobe came up to him. The pink-haired boy held up Luffy's club. I should probably give this back to you. Kobe offered his tone, hinting at embarrassment. Luffy looked at his old club, forged from the metal pipes he and his two brothers had wielded during their childhood. In the Grey Terminal and Dawn Island in general, one needed a weapon to survive. If the criminals didn't get you, the wild animals in the forests would. He almost reached out to accept it, but he stopped himself. Sabo was dead. Ace had gone off on his own adventures years ago. Why was he the only one holding on to a piece of his past? He needed to leave the Goa Kingdom behind and move forward. Luffy smiled as he pushed the club back into Kobe's hands. You keep it. It seems to have come in handy with helmet hair. Kobe seemed like he was about to faint. But it's yours, and I can barely lift it. It took all my strength just to swing it. Then get stronger, Luffy replied as he turned back to his food. When you're able to wield it effectively, then you'll know you've gotten stronger, or just melt it down and make something new. Thank you, Luffy. Kobe seemed to be on the verge of tears. This is the first gift anyone had ever given me. I promise I'll use it to get stronger. Nami frowned as she walked along the docks of Shell's town. Commander Ripper led her, Luffy, and Zoro to their new ship. While a part of her was excited, another part was confusing. She didn't know what to make of her new companions. Zoro seemed like the strong, silent type. He was stubborn, fierce, but thankfully not as bloodthirsty as his reputation would have had her believe. He seemed like kind of an idiot at times. After drinking with him last night, she learned that the only reason he became a bounty hunter was that he got lost and couldn't find his way home and had to bounty hunt to survive. Then there was Luffy. She couldn't help but turn to him as they walked along the docks. The boy claimed to want to be the next pirate king. And while he certainly dressed like a pirate, he was otherwise the complete opposite of a typical pirate. As a thief who robbed pirates, she had seen numerous pirate crews and their captains throughout her years. They were greedy, bloodthirsty, immoral thieves who didn't care about the innocent people they hurt as they plundered their way across the sea. Luffy, on the other hand, seemed content to help people. Nami shook those thoughts from her head. All that mattered was getting the money to free her village. She had a little over 10 million billy to go. Then she would be free and could take her life back into her own hands. They walked over to a nearby ship which Commander Ripper gestured towards. It was a small ship, definitely not something that could be used for combat, though it was bigger than the fishing boat. I can't give you a marine ship or any ship on the books. This is a pinnace-class ship we captured from a group of smugglers a few days ago who were pretending to be traders. It hasn't been logged into any of our reports so that no one will miss it. I know it's not very glorious, but it's the best I can offer. I've already had it loaded with food and other supplies along with everything from Morgan's old offices. No cannons, Zoro grumbled as he looked around at the vessel. Ripper nodded. It's a light ship designed for speed, not combat. It meant to have a crew of 6, but 2 people could manage to sail it fairly well. I'm sorry if it's not what you're looking for, but it's all I can offer. It beats the fishing boat at least. Nami agreed as she inspected the ship. It is clearly built for speed, and with how low it is, it could travel through shallow waters and inland rivers. It'll do until we can get a proper ship. Luffy nodded happily. Let's get our stuff loaded up from my fishing boat and set out to sea. Eventually, they got the new ship loaded with all the supplies and treasure from Luffy's old fishing boat and set sail from Shell's town. As they departed, Kobe stood on the docks along with numerous marines and townspeople who were bidding them farewell. Nami waved happily towards the crowds. Zoro was waving lazily as he leaned against the mast. However, she noticed that Luffy was hiding behind the mainmast as he tried to stay out of sight from everyone on shore. Why are you hiding? Aren't you glad that they're sending us off with such fanfare? Nami asked, confused by the boy's attempts to hide. No, they're treating me like I'm a hero. Luffy seemed to shiver as if the very implication of being a hero terrified him. Nami rolled her eyes. You took down a corrupt marine captain, saved numerous people's lives, and freed a town from oppression. That makes you a hero, Luffy. She couldn't believe what she was saying, but the pirate in front of her was a hero. I'm not a hero, I'm a pirate, Luffy declared stubbornly as he got out from behind the mainmast once they were out of sight from the island. Heroes are selfless and share everything. I want to keep all the treasure and meat. I won't part with a single coin or scrap or meat with anyone other than my crew. He's got a point, Zoro muttered as he joined the conversation. Being a hero means sharing booze with strangers. I ain't sharing anything. You guys are weird. That's the dumbest reasoning I've ever heard. Nami wondered if she would ever understand these two. They were utter weirdos who had no business trying to be pirates. But she had more important things to think about right now. Let's focus on something important, dividing the spoils of our victory. Our victory? Zoro asked skeptically. All I saw you do was get taken hostage. Nami waved him away. I have a particular set of skills that were not suited for that situation. Now enough talk. I want my 80% cut. Sure thing, Luffy declared as he walked over to a nearby chest that was sitting on the deck. I already have your cut. He shoved the chest towards her, and she immediately grabbed it and opened it up greedily. Her joy turned to confusion as she opened the chest and counted the money within it. This can't be right. There are only 80,000 billion here. How is this my cut? They should have gotten more, especially with them getting the valuables from Helmeppo and Morgan's offices. Luffy smiled. They gave us 100,000 billion cash so that you're cut. I don't see what the problem is. Do you not know how to do basic math? Well, what about all the silks and other valuables we got from the base? Nami asked as she turned towards Luffy. I want my cut of that like we agreed upon when I joined you. I get 8% of all treasure. No, Luffy shook his head as he wore a smug smile. We agreed you would get 80% of all cash we got. Treasure such as gold and jewels were not included in that deal. Nami thought back to the deal, and she recalled his words. So we agreed that all cash bully is split between us 80/20 in your favor. Those had been his exact words before they shook hands. She only now realized that he had only mentioned cash. She wasn't going to let that stand. Gold and jewels were implied in our deal, she declared, intent on avoiding being ripped off by a pirate. If you don't like our original deal, then we can do this in typical pirate fashion. We are all pirates, after all, aren't we? Nami winced at being referred to as a pirate, but she was willing to go along with this for as long as she had to. What is typical pirate fashion? She asked, curious as to where this was going. All hands get an equal share of any loot, after expenses such as food, ship repairs, and other essentials. That's how Shanks did things. And that's how I plan to do it, so the treasure gets split 3 ways since there are only 3 of us. It wasn't an ideal solution, but Nami was willing to play along for now. Fine, but I expect a big score for our next adventure if I have to share it evenly. She couldn't stay away too long from Arlong. He was okay with her going out for long periods, but his patience wasn't infinite. She had to make each journey away from him count in terms of how much bully she brought back home. Don't worry, I know a certain pirate with a bunch of treasure that we are going to visit, Luffy declared happily. That bit of news lifted her spirits. Stealing from pirates is my specialty, she declared happily, overjoyed at the prospect of robbing a pirate. So who is our victim? We aren't going to steal from him. Not as our first option anyway. Luffy pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket and slammed it onto the ship's deck. This is our next crew member. Nami and Zoro walked up and inspected the piece of paper, and Nami couldn't help but frown as she read the name and viewed the picture of the pirate they were after. Buggy the Clown. Bounty 15 million bully. You want to recruit Buggy the Clown? Nami asked angrily. While she didn't know the pirate personally, she had heard stories. He's a greedy pirate who robs and steals everything in sight. Why would you want someone like him to join you? I need him if I'm going to beat Shanks, Luffy answered simply. Nami was tired of the boy's stupidity. You keep talking about Shanks. Who is Shanks? And why do you need to beat him? I have no idea what you're talking about. Same here, Zoro answered in a bored tone. You're the captain, so I'll follow your orders, but I would like to know why we're trying to recruit that weirdo, he muttered as he pointed at the bounty poster. Luffy let out a tired sigh. My role model and the man who gave me this compass is the red-haired pirate Shanks. Luffy pulled out another bounty poster and placed it next to Buggy's. Red-haired Shanks. Bounty 4,548,900,000. One of the 4 emperors. Nami couldn't believe what she was seeing. She had heard stories about them. Pirates so powerful that they ruled over their own empires in the Grand Line in direct defiance of the world government. How did you meet one of them? And what does Buggy have to do with it? Zoro asked, his curiosity piqued. Shanks mentioned that he and Buggy used to be crewmates on a pirate ship, Luffy explained. When their original captain died, Shanks asked Buggy to join his crew. Buggy refused. So if I can do something that Shanks wasn't able to do and get Buggy on my crew, then I'll prove I'm a better pirate captain. This job doesn't sound like it pays well. Nami grumbled. Recruiting a pirate didn't sound like it would get her much money. Buggy is bound to have treasure or be at a place filled with treasure. Shanks said he was greedy, Luffy said. I'm sure we will find a way to make a profit. Good enough for me, Zoro muttered lazily. I'm going to take a nap. Wake me when we get there. Nami let out a tired sigh as she directed her attention to the ship's sails and grabbed hold of the helm. Fine, so what's our heading? How are we going to find this clown pirate? Luffy flipped open his compass, which made Nami roll her eyes. Again, with that compass, it doesn't point north. We aren't looking for north, Luffy replied as he held the compass up to her. Show us where the pirate Buggy the Clown is. Nami watched as the compass needle suddenly moved until it was pointing east. That way, Luffy declared as he pointed east. Let's set sail to adventure and treasure. Nami adjusted the ship's course due east. However, her gaze lingered on the compass. If they did find Buggy the Clown, that would mean that the compass could point to whatever the user wanted, a ludicrous idea. But then again, a few days ago, a man who could transform into a dragon would have been ridiculous to her. Nami smiled as she thought about the possibilities of a compass that could point to whatever you desire. If this journey didn't pay off, then she had another way of making this trip profitable. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.